The man without my husband's face hospital scene begins corridor felt like a tunnel between two lives, the one I had survived and the one I wasn't prepared to enter. I could hear the echo of my own footsteps, slow and hollow, as if the ground beneath me was unsure whether to hold me or let me fall. Hospitals don't care for poetry, yet in that moment, everything felt painfully symbolic. Even the flickering fluorescent lights above me seemed to stutter like a heartbeat trapped between hope and horror. My name had been called moments before, Miss Cole. Please, this way, Miss Cole. The title wrapped around my throat like a noose. I had never taken his last name. I never got the chance. The wedding never happened. But the world, in its cruel irony, still insisted on binding me to a name that had become more ghost than truth. The nurse walked ahead of me, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. She moved with the practiced calm of someone who had guided too many people through too much grief. I, on the other hand, walked like someone being led to a memory I didn't ask to relive. The ICU door loomed ahead, tall, metallic, indifferent. There's something chilling about doors in places like this. They hold more secrets than rooms ever could. They are thresholds, demanding that once you cross them, you cannot return unchanged. My hand hesitated over the handle, and in that single moment of stillness, I felt it, the weight of every unanswered question, every lonely night, every whisper of what if that had stalked me for 5 long years. Grief was supposed to have an end, a grave, closure, but mine never did, because closure requires truth. And my story had only ever given me silence. Are you ready? The nurse asked softly, her voice a fragile thread in the air. Ready? I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. Grief does not prepare you for hope, and hope after burial is more dangerous than death. Still, I nodded. I pushed the door. The lights inside were harsh, unforgiving. Machines beeped steadily, counting breaths with mechanical precision, as if life could be measured in numbers. A single bed stood at the center, surrounded by metal stands, tubes, and transparent bags dripping life into veins. My eyes moved slowly, cautiously to the figure lying on that bed. A sheet covered most of him, tucked neatly around a body that looked too still to belong to someone truly alive. Bandages wrapped around his temple, his arm, part of his jaw. His skin was unnaturally pale beneath the sterile glow of the overhead lamps. I took a step forward, then another. My pulse pounded like thunder in my ears. This was supposed to be a reunion. The moment every grieving lover dreams of in the darkest hours of the night. He's alive. But as I moved closer, nothing in my soul recognized him. My breath came short and sharp. I stared at his face, or what was visible of it, and a hollow coldness spread through me. That was not Ethan, not the man who used to laugh with his whole face, eyes crinkling at the corners. Not the man who held me like I was the only real thing in a world made of glass. Not the man who disappeared without a trace the night before our wedding. Yet there it was, his name, printed in black ink on the hospital wristband strapped around the stranger's arm. Ethan Cole. I felt something inside me crack. Not break, crack. Quiet, subtle, dangerous. The kind of fracture that deepens over time until one day, with the slightest pressure, everything collapses. No, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. The nurse turned to me. You don't recognize him? My lips parted, but no words came out at first. Recognition is a strange thing. It comes not just through the eyes, but through the soul. And my soul was silent. Finally, I spoke steady, precise, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. That is not my husband. The moment I realized the truth was a trap, the nurse blinked. Her expression caught somewhere between confusion and pity. She glanced back at the unconscious man, then at me, as if hoping my eyes would soften, as if grief might eventually force recognition where none existed. But the ID we found on him, she began. I didn't let her finish. Names can be stolen, I said quietly. Faces cannot. The words felt like stone in my mouth. Heavy, final. The nurse hesitated, her training wrestling with uncertainty. She looked at the chart in her hand, then back at me. I watched her, and something shifted in the air between us, a silent acknowledgement that this was no longer just about a patient and a visitor. Something was wrong here. Terribly wrong. Silence pressed in from all sides. I looked again at the wristband. Ethan Cole. The letters sat there so calmly, so confidently, as if they had every right to exist on this stranger's body. Rage simmered beneath my skin, slow and controlled, not a fire, but an ember, the dangerous kind. The kind that waits. My fingers curled at my sides. In that single moment, I knew. This wasn't a miracle. It was a message. Someone wanted me here. Someone wanted me to see this. Someone wanted to remind me that Ethan Cole was not dead, he was missing. I took a breath, deep and unsteady. The nurse finally spoke again, softer now. He was brought in after an accident. Car wreck. He had no phone, no wallet, just that ID card. The police ran the name and... She hesitated. And your contact was still on file. Still.as if I had been waiting by the phone all these years, frozen in time, clinging to a hope I never asked for. And no one had ever updated it. No one had ever erased me. They had all just left me attached to a ghost. Do you want to speak to the doctor? Do I want to? 1.as if I had wanted any of this. I nodded once. The doctor entered moments later. A man in his late 50s with tired eyes and a face carved by years of delivering bad news. He looked at me carefully, the way people do when they're about to cut open a wound you've spent years stitching shut. Miss Cole, he said. There it was again, the name that didn't belong to me anymore. I understand this must be difficult. But this man, he glanced at the chart, Ethan Cole, he's in a coma. We need a family contact to make decisions if necessary. Family. The word hit harder than I expected. I looked at the bed again, at the stranger breathing under my husband's name. Machines beeped steadily, indifferent to my rising heartbeat. I told the nurse, I said slowly, this is not my fiancé. The doctor adjusted his glasses, studying me. And, when was the last time you saw him? 5 years ago. The night everything was stolen from me. Not just love, identity. The night before our wedding, I answered. Something flickered across his face, curiosity, perhaps. Or concern. And you're certain? I met his eyes. My voice was calm. Too calm. I would know the face of the men I loved. Silence. Then, something strange happened. The doctor exhaled slowly, not disbelief, not dismissal, but something like acceptance. Then, he said carefully, closing the file, you may want to see this. He reached into the folder and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside it, stained with dried blood and shattered at one corner, was Ethan's old engagement ring, the one I had slipped onto his finger the night before he vanished. My breath caught. Not my ring. His. My ring for him. A simple silver band with a date etched inside. 03:17, the day he asked me to marry him. The room swayed. Just slightly. Like the world had shifted half an inch to the left. I stared at it, that tiny circle of metal that had once meant forever, now stained by a life it did not belong to. That's when I knew. This was not a mistake. This was a warning. The ring, the lie, and the ghost of a promise. Ethan's engagement ring sat in the evidence bag like a captured memory, cold, silent, and stained with someone else's blood. I reached out, my fingertips brushing the plastic. And in that brief touch, something inside me trembled. It was the same ring I had slipped onto Ethan's finger 5 years ago. In a moment so pure it hurt to remember. I could still feel the warmth of his skin when he pulled me into his arms afterward. Still hear his breath against my ear when he whispered, from this moment, it's you and me against the world, against the world. Funny. In the end, it was the world that swallowed him whole and left me standing alone. Now here it was, returned to me on the hand of a stranger. The doctor's voice broke through the static in my head. It was found in his pocket, he explained quietly. We believed it was sentimental. Sentimental. The word felt wrong. This, whatever this was not sentiment. It was a message, one carved in blood and wrapped in my husband's name. I lifted my gaze slowly to the man lying on the bed. Who was he? Why carry Ethan's ring? Why use Ethan's name? Why now? 5 years of silence broken by a single phone call, a ring, and a face that did not belong to my past. but was pulling me toward a truth I had tried to bury. The doctor continued speaking, but his words blurred at the edges of my mind, drowned out by another sound of memory. Rain. The night before the wedding. The knock on the door. The last time I saw Ethan's face. It came back slowly at first, then all at once the world narrowing to that moment. Flashback. The final night train tapped against the window like restless fingers. Ethan stood by the door, his coat half on, eyes bright with something I couldn't quite name. Tension? Excitement? Fear? He had kissed me softly at first, then deeper, like a man trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. I just need to handle one last thing, he had said. At this hour? I asked, frowning. He hesitated. Trust me. I did. I always did. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumb brushing my cheek. Tomorrow, you'll walk toward me, and the world will finally know I chose you. I chose you. Those were the last words he ever said to me. By morning, he was gone, without a note, without a call, without a trace. They searched, they speculated, they whispered. Maybe he changed his mind. Men like him don't really marry girls like her. Maybe she pushed him too hard. I learned that the world doesn't comfort the abandoned. It interrogates them. And I never had a grave to mourn at. No body, no goodbye. Just a wedding dress that never touched the aisle. And a name that turned into a wound I could never close. Back to the present. Ikui blinked the memory away. My hand still resting near the evidence bag. The doctor spoke again, gentler now. We need consent for surgery if his condition worsens. If you are not legally connected to him, we will need to contact. I am not signing anything, I said. He nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. But you will want to stay available. The authorities will contact you soon. Authorities? My pulse quickened. This was deeper than a medical formality. Something about this felt staged, planned, orchestrated. I looked one final time at the stranger's face. He was breathing. He was alive. Ethan was not. I turned away. As I reached the door, the doctor called after me. Miss Cole. If not him, then who? I paused, and for the first time in 5 years, I spoke a truth I had never allowed myself to voice out loud. Whoever he is, he's the first sign that Ethan didn't just disappear. I looked back, my eyes cold, steady. He was taken. The door, the whisper, and the beginning of Warth's door to the ICU clicked shut behind me, sealing the stranger inside that cold room of machines and stolen identity. But as I stepped back into the corridor, I realized something had shifted inside me. For 5 years, I had lived like a widow without a death certificate. Everyone around me learned to move on. They spoke of him less. They stopped asking. Their pity grew quieter, then disappeared altogether. Society has no patience for the grief that lingers without a body. They treat it like an obsession, a personal failure. A woman mourning a dead husband is tragic. A woman mourning a missing one is inconvenient. So I adapted. I built a life out of ashes. I learned how to breathe without hope. Hope is cruel. Hope keeps you at the window long after the footsteps fade. But now, hope had returned. Not as light, but as a storm. At the end of the hallway, I paused by the window overlooking the parking lot below. Sirens wailed in the distance. Reflections of blue and red lights streaked across the wet pavement like bleeding colors on a canvas. I stared at my own reflection, faintly visible in the glass. I no longer recognized the woman I once was. Before Ethan vanished, people saw me as a girl in love. After he disappeared, they saw me as a cautionary tale. A punchline whispered in high society circles. The girl who thought she could marry into the coals. They said I didn't belong. They said I was just a phase. And when Ethan vanished, they made sure I understood what it meant to be alone. His mother, Evelyn Cole, had looked down at me during that final press conference, her expression composed, her lipstick flawless, and said into the flashing cameras, "We hope he will be found. And may God give strength to those who were closest to him, those, not her." I was never her in that sentence. From that day on, I disappeared too. Not physically. No, I was still breathing. But I became invisible in rooms where I was once adored, at doors where I was once welcomed. And yet someone remembered me, because someone had sent me that call. Someone had put that ring in that man's pocket. Someone had signed Ethan's name in a place it didn't belong. Not a mistake. Not fate. A summons. I pressed my fingertips against the cold window glass. Ethan, I whispered into the night, not sure if I was calling him or cursing him. Then a sound. Soft, almost imperceptible, like paper brushing against the floor. I turned sharply. A single white envelope had been slipped beneath the bench near the ICU door, like someone had waited for me to walk away before placing it there. My heart thudded once, hard. I walked toward it slowly. My heels clicked against the tiles, strangely loud in the emptiness of the corridor. The nurse's station was empty. The hallway felt deserted, like it was holding its breath. I crouched down, my fingers closing around the envelope. My name was written across it in ink not printed. Handwritten. Not Miss Cole. Not Miss. Just to the one who still waits. For a moment, the world went completely silent, like the calm before an explosion. I looked around. Someone had been here, watching, waiting. My pulse hammered through my veins. I slipped a finger under the seal before I could open it. The lights flickered, once, twice, and in the sudden hush of the corridor, I heard it. A voice. Faint, muffled, distant. It whispered my name, not aloud, not in sound. In memory. Black Queen. His old nickname for me. Find me. The envelope trembled in my hand, and in that moment, 5 years of grief hardened into purpose. Cold, precise, unbreakable. This was no longer about closure. This was war. 5 years ago, the night before the wedding, grief has a scent. It is antiseptic in rain on cold pavement. But love has a different scent. Warm lilies, fresh linen, champagne, whispered promises under fairy lights. 5 years ago, this same world smelled of celebrations, not hospital corridors. Back then, I still believed in happy endings. B1, the rehearsal dinner. Night before the wedding was a dream carved in gold and candlelight. The ballroom at the Coles estate was draped in silk and dripping with orchids imported from Florence. A string quartet played near the glass walls overlooking the garden, where floating lanterns hovered above the pond like captive stars. The air shimmered with laughter, clinking glasses, and the subtle perfume of old money trying to look effortless. Everyone called it the union of love. Everyone else knew it was a merger. The Cole family did not do anything for love, they did it for legacy. I sensed it the moment I walked in. Eyes followed me. Soft smiles, sharp whispers, approval, wrapped in judgment. She's beautiful, but not one of us. Well, Ethan always had a rebellious streak. Let him have his little fairy tale before he grows up. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't need to. The clink of crystal glasses carried it for them. Ethan appeared by my side, placing a hand gently but deliberately on my back as if to anchor me. Ignore them, he whispered, brushing a stray curl behind my ear. In 24 hours, you'll be my wife, and they'll have no choice but to love you. I smiled because I wanted to believe him. My dress emerald silk that he had chosen hugged me like a second skin. My skin glowed beneath the chandeliers, and my heart felt light. This was supposed to be my moment. The first warning, but then his mother made her entrance. Evelyn Cole didn't walk. She arrived, graceful, poised, like a queen stepping into court. Her gown's silver velvet flowed behind her like mist. Her jewelry wasn't just expensive, it was ancestral, worn with the weight of generations. She approached us, her smile polite to polite. Darling, she said to Ethan before acknowledging me. Then, with perfect elegance, she turned to me. You look lovely tonight. Lovely. Not stunning. Not radiant. Lovely, the word you use for a well-behaved girl you don't plan to keep. Ethan, ever the peacemaker, placed an arm around my waist protectively. Mother, his tone held a warning. Evelyn's eyes softened, pretending warmth. I only mean, she continued, brushing an invisible speck from her sleeve, tomorrow will be Quite a transformation for you. Becoming a Cole carries responsibilities most outsiders don't understand. Outsider. The word landed like glass under my heel. I met her gaze. I didn't bow. I didn't fold. I learned fast. I said calmly. Something flickered in her eyes. It wasn't approval. It was calculation. And then, the signal between the music and the applause and the speeches dipped in honeyed lies. Something happened that I did not notice back then, but now, looking back, it was the first move on the chessboard. A man in a dark suit leaned down to whisper something to Evelyn Cole. Her expression didn't change, but she tapped her fingers twice against her glass, a signal. To someone, somewhere, Ethan didn't notice. And no one noticed, except maybe someone did. A figure stood at the far end of the hall, near the balcony, half in shadow. A man I didn't recognize, watching us, not like a guest enjoying the night. No, like a guard watching a hostage exchange. And when my eyes met his, he did not look away. The first crack in the perfect night's music shifted into something softer. The kind of melody that makes the world slow down just enough for doubt to crawl in. Ethan was pulled away by his groomsmen for an impromptu toast. Laughter, whiskey, the smell of cigars. He glanced back at me, smiling, mouthing, "I'll be right back." I believed him. I stayed where I was, one hand resting lightly on the stem of my glass, my eyes tracing the lanterns floating over the water outside. That's when I heard it. My name. Not spoken with love, not spoken with pride, spoken like a problem. Her? A voice, male, sharp, amused. I didn't turn around immediately. Ethan has always been emotional, another voice replied, older, silkier. It won't last. Once he has secured the merger and taken his place on the board, this phase will end. Phase. I was a phase. Like a hairstyle. Like a teenage rebellion. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see them clearly in the reflection of the glass wall. Uncle Richard. Ethan's uncle, the one who handled most of the Cole family business overseas. Next to him stood Dr. Harland, a board member of the Cole Foundation, a family friend and the kind of man who smiled warmly while sharpening a knife. And what if he actually intends to keep her? Dr. Harland asked, swirling his drink. Richard chuckled. Then we will handle it. Handle it. 2 words. Calm, casual, cold. The stranger Movesi exhaled slowly, controlling my heartbeat. Turning around too fast would make me look rattled. I wasn't rattled. Not yet. But something inside me shifted just a fraction, like a door cracking open in a dark hallway. That's when I felt it again. Eyes. Watching. Me. I looked toward the balcony. The shadowed man was gone. Not walked away. Not blended into the crowd. Gone. As if he were never there. A hand on my shoulder. You shouldn't have heard that. The voice came from behind me, low and unfamiliar. I turned slowly. A man stood there, tall, well-tailored suit, hair slicked back with military precision. He wasn't a guest. I knew every guest by name. Evelyn had made sure of that with her perfectly curated guest list. This man didn't belong here, but he wore a staff badge clipped discreetly to his jacket. Event security. Private. Contracted. Not the hotel's usual staff. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were like glass, clear, reflective, hiding everything. "Do I know you?" I asked. "No," he said simply. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "But I know you." My breath caught just for a second. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" I asked, keeping my tone steady, matching his. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "It's a warning." Just then Ethan returns. "There you are." Ethan's voice broke through the tension like sunlight through glass. The man stepped back instantly, melting into the movement of the waitstaff as if he had always been just another silent shadow carrying champagne. Ethan slipped his arm around me, oblivious. "You disappeared," he said with a grin. "Thought you changed your mind about marrying me." I looked at him, really looked at him. The joy in his eyes, the unguarded love, the childlike excitement that the night couldn't dim. "Never," I whispered, and in that moment, I meant it. Whatever storm was gathering in the distance, I still believed love could outrun it. I didn't yet understand. Some storms aren't meant to be outrun, some storms are designed. He stepped away for 10 minutes and came back different. Night glittered on the surface, laughter, music, the gentle clinking of crystal, but underneath it, something had already begun to shift. Ethan stayed by my side for a while, talking to guests, smiling that easy smile of his, the one that made people forgive him even before he made a mistake. His hand remained at the small of my back, like a promise, but eventually, duty called. I need to go over the final contract papers with my uncle, he whispered. 10 minutes. Then we vanish and sneak out to the gardens like teenagers. I tried to make light of it. Make it 5. He grinned. 5. And just like that, he was gone, swept into a private conversation with Uncle Richard and Dr. Harlan near the far end of the ballroom. He didn't look back this time. Something is off. 5 minutes passed, then 7. Then 10. The music swelled. The laughter around me grew louder, voices, clinking, perfume, movement, but suddenly I felt very alone in a room full of people. I scanned the hall. No Ethan. No Richard. No Harlan. The balcony doors were slightly ajar, curtains swaying just a little too much, as if someone had passed through just moments ago. A pulse of unease throbbed through me. The balcony slipped through the crowd, my heels silent against the marble floor. The air outside was cooler, the night wind brushing against my skin like the whisper of a warning. The balcony overlooked the garden. Lanterns floated above the pond, their reflections trembling in the water like stars afraid of falling. At first, I saw nothing, then movement. 2 figures stood at the far end of the stone terrace, half hidden in the shadows by the column. Richard and Ethan. Ethan's posture was tense, his hands clenched by his sides, something I had never seen in him before. Richard was speaking in that calm, detached way of his, hands moving slowly, deliberately like a snake weaving between rocks. I stepped closer just enough to hear fragments. Not ready to lead. Does not belong in this family. You think love protects you? You're naive. Ethan's voice lower, restrained but trembling with something fierce. I love her. This is not a negotiation. Silence. Then Richard laughed, soft, calculated. Everything is a negotiation, Ethan. Ethan's jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw him look small. Not weak. Small like a boy standing in the shadow of a lineage too big, too cold, too golden to defy. Then he saw me, then turned his head just slightly, and his eyes met mine. Something flickered in them. Fear? Regret? No, resignation. And then, like a switch had been flipped behind his eyes, his expression went blank. He straightened, adjusted his cufflink like a man remembering his place, and turned fully toward Richard. It will be handled, he said, voice eerily calm. Richard's lips curled in satisfaction. Good boy. Good boy. 2 words. 2 words that made my skin crawl. The moment he returned, Ethan walked back toward the ballroom with perfect composure, shoulders straight, face composed, but there was an emptiness in his eyes, a distance I hadn't seen before. I stepped forward to meet him halfway. Ethan, he stopped before me, gave me a practiced smile. Sorry, he said lightly. Got caught up in family matters. Come, dance with me. It was his voice, but it wasn't him. Not the Ethan I knew. Not the man who looked at me like I was home. This one looked at me like I was an obligation to protect. Not love, possession, and that was the moment. The night began to die. The dance, the note, and the warning no bride should receiveth orchestra shifted into a waltz, smooth and elegant, a perfect picture of celebration. Ethan took my hand and led me to the center of the ballroom. Eyes followed us, approving, expectant, a perfect couple in a perfect story. But perfection is often the neatest disguise for disaster. His hand rested on my waist, but it felt distant, rehearsed, like muscle memory without heart. I looked up at him, searching his face. He smiled, but his eyes, they didn't quite meet mine. A whisper that wasn't meant for me as we turned with the music, drifting past polished faces and champagne smiles. I caught Evelyn's gaze across the room. She stood near the head table, hands clasped around a glass of white wine. watching us. Not with joy, with evaluation. She leaned slightly toward Dr. Harland, whispering something behind the rim of her glass. His response was almost lost in the music. But I heard it. Once it's done, everything will return to order. Once it's done. The words cut through the music like a blade. I stumbled just a fraction, but Ethan's grip tightened around me, steadying me. Careful, he murmured. His tone was gentle, but there was something new in it. Something like control. The hand brush we turned again, spinning past the back entrance where staff moved quietly with trays of champagne and polished silver. That's when it happened. As we brushed past the edge of the dance floor, someone from the staff passed close, a server carrying a tray of crystal glasses. He moved naturally, part of the motion, unseen by everyone, but as he passed, his fingers lightly grazed my hand, just a whisper of contact. A folded piece of paper pressed into my palm, slipped so discreetly that even Ethan didn't notice. I froze for a heartbeat. The server continued walking, not even glancing back. It was him, the same man from earlier, the one with the glass eyes and the warning voice. The Notemi heart thudded against my ribs, but I kept dancing, smiling, moving, pretending while my fingers closed around the paper inside my palm. I couldn't read it here. Not under these lights. Not under these eyes. At the precise moment the song ended and applause filled the room, I slid my hand down to my side, letting the note fall behind the folds of my dress. Hidden, Ethan leaned close to kiss my forehead. Tomorrow, we begin forever, he said softly. His words would have once melted me. Now they felt like a sentence. I read it in the mirror light later that night, when the celebration finally thinned and guests drifted away like ghosts leaving a banquet. I stood alone in the powder room. Soft golden lights reflected multiple versions of me in the mirror. The bride-to-be, the outsider, the liability. My fingers trembled as I finally unfolded the note. 7 words, written in jagged ink, rushed, urgent. He won't stand beside you tomorrow. Everything inside me went silent. No heartbeat, no breath. Just those 7 words, and then in tiny script at the bottom, almost like an afterthought. If you want the truth, come alone. I stared at my own reflection all around me. The world still believed in flowers and champagne and wedding bells. But deep in the mirror, in the eyes staring back at me, I saw it, the first flicker of a woman who would one day be called the Black Queen. The last midnight before the wedding, midnight came, dressed in silence. The rehearsal dinner was over. Guests had either retired to the guest rooms in the Cole estate or left with champagne warm smiles, unaware that a war had already begun behind the lace and crystal. The servants dimmed the chandeliers, and the golden ballroom slowly descended into shadow. Laughter faded into echoes. The scent of lilies and perfume lingered in the air like a memory that refused to die. Everyone believed tomorrow would be a wedding, only I knew something had already gone wrong. I stood outside on the terrace, away from the remnants of celebration. The night air clung to my skin like cold silk. In my hand the note still burned. He won't stand beside you tomorrow. A simple sentence. But simple things, when true, can crack entire worlds. The estate at night, the Cole family estate at midnight, looked like something out of a Gothic painting. The tall windows were dark, the halls lit only by distant sconces flickering like tired fireflies. The massive iron gates were closed, guarded by 2 silent figures. Security. Not the wedding kind. The kind you hire when something valuable needs to be contained. It should have bothered me. Maybe it did, but I hadn't yet learned how to name danger when it came wearing tailored suits and family crests. I searched for him. He wasn't supposed to. Every tradition and rule demanded that the bride and groom stay apart the night before the ceremony. But traditions had never saved anyone from truth. I went to Ethan's room. The corridor was silent, carpet soft beneath my feet. Oil paintings of Cole ancestors watched me with cold, painted eyes. The empire builders, the donors, the men in portraits who had never known hunger or fear. The door to Ethan's room was closed. I raised my hand to knock, then stopped, because I heard voices. Behind the door at first it was just muffled sound. Then, as I leaned closer, the words began to shape. You understand what is expected. Richard's voice calm, emotionless. Silence. Then Ethan spoke slowly, reluctantly. And if I refuse? A short pause. Then Richard's answer came with a softness that chilled more than anger ever could. Then she walks in tomorrow. And you do not. My breath caught in my chest. Not stand beside me. Not walk in. Not live to walk in. I pressed closer. Heart pounding. Don't threaten her, Ethan said, but there was a tremor in his voice I had never heard before. Richard's tone sharpened. You think this is about her? A low, quiet laugh. Ethan, this is about us. Our name. There are rules. And a man who breaks them is disposable. But a woman who doesn't belong, she is replaceable. Replaceable. The word struck me like ice water. And then silence. The kind that doesn't mean peace. The kind that means decision. I stepped back, heart hammering against my ribs, a tremor running through my hands. This wasn't just coldness. It wasn't just disapproval. This was strategy. This was removal. A door opened. He moved back just as the door handle clicked. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I stood there, eyes fixed ahead, just in time to see Ethan step out. His face was pale, his eyes unbearably tired. When he saw me, he froze, like a man caught between two worlds. The look in his eyes that didn't belong to the man I loved for a heartbeat. The hallway stood frozen, Ethan in the doorway, me a few steps away, the silence between us louder than any scream. He looked at me the way a man looks at a dream he no longer believes he deserves. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. His voice sounded human, but his eyes looked like a prisoner's, not a groom, not a lover, a man bound to something invisible and ancient. Richard appears before I could speak. A shadow moved behind him. Uncle Richard stepped into view, perfect posture, his suit still immaculate despite the late hour. He didn't seem surprised to see me. If anything, he looked amused, as if he had expected this. A bride wandering the halls at midnight, he said smoothly. Superstition frowns upon that. I met his gaze. I didn't look away. Superstition doesn't concern me, I said, but lies do. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, flickered with a glint of something darker. You're dramatic, he said calmly. That will be inconvenient. Ethan moves closer, but something's wrong. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself slightly between me and Richard as if shielding me, but his body language spoke another truth. He wasn't standing with me. He was standing between us like a man torn in two. Let's talk somewhere else, he said quietly, reaching for my hand. Richard didn't stop him. He only watched like a man watching a chess piece move exactly where he predicted it would. As Ethan led me down the hallway, I could feel it a shift. Ethan's fingers were warm around mine, but there was tension, like he was holding on too tightly, as if I might vanish. Ethan, I whispered, once we turned the corner, out of Richard's sight. What are they planning? He didn't answer. His silence was a blade. The first crack in his voice. We reached a small antechamber overlooking the dark garden. Moonlight spilled in through the tall window, lighting the dust in the air like silver ash. I turned to face him fully. Look at me, I said. He hesitated, then did. For a second, I saw him, my Ethan, the man who once knelt in the grass with a ring made of wildflowers because he couldn't afford the diamond yet. But then, that look faded, and something else settled in, a defeated calm. There are things you don't understand, he said quietly. Then explain them, I replied. Because I heard Richard. I heard him talk about replacing me, handling me. What does that mean? His jaw clenched. He looked past me out the window into the night. This family, my family, they don't lose, they don't bend, so they break. I finished coldly. He closed his eyes. That was my answer. The moment I knew fear, he took a step back, not physically scared, but spiritually aware. For the first time since the wedding was announced, I felt it. Something ancient and ruthless lurked beneath this estate, hidden not in basements or vaults, but in blood. Ethan, I said slowly, every word carefully measured. Do you want to marry me? His eyes snapped to mine, and in that second I saw the truth. He did, but his lips said, it's not that simple. It is. My voice was calm. Either you walk with me tomorrow, or you don't. The note in my dress felt like a brand against my skin. He won't stand beside you tomorrow. Ethan's breathing hitched just for a second, and in that tiny breath, he told me everything without a word. Run. But the warning came too late. A moonlight stretched across the floor in pale ribbons, cutting through the silence between us. Ethan stood there, my almost husband, his chest rising and falling with a quiet panic that he tried desperately to control. I need you to trust me, he whispered. I did, I replied softly. Until tonight. Pain flickered in his eyes, raw and fleeting. Then he stepped closer, so close I could feel the tremor in his hands. Listen to me, he said, voice barely more than breath. If anything feels off tomorrow, if I don't meet you at the alley you walk, do you understand? You leave. Don't ask questions. Don't look back. Just run. The words echoed in the chamber like a curse. Why would I need to run from my wedding, Ethan? His mouth opened, but something behind me shifted in the shadows. A soft scraping sound, like a shoe against marble. We were not alone. Ethan's eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. He knew who stood in the dark, and he was afraid. The shadow steps forward slowly, deliberately. A figure detached itself from the shadows near the corridor entrance. His steps were silent, controlled, predatory, grace honed into professionalism. It was him, the man with the glass eyes, the man who had slipped me the note, the one who warned me. But something was different now. His face wasn't cold. It was tense. Not like a man delivering messages, like a man on a mission. Ethan's entire posture changed, shoulders tensing, stepping fractionally in front of me, blocking me from view. Not now, Ethan said through clenched teeth. The man ignored him. His eyes locked onto mine, steady, unwavering. Time's up, he said softly. My blood ran cold, the unspoken threat. She leaves tonight. The man said, his tone flat, like he was stating a schedule. Not a threat. Before dawn. With or without your consent. I stared at him. Leaves? Tonight? Ethan stepped forward, fury rising like fire under his skin. We had a deal, he hissed. Tomorrow, after plans changed. The man cut in, unmoved. A slow blink. Orders from above. Above. Higher than Ethan. Higher than Richard. Higher than Evelyn. Someone I hadn't yet seen. Someone who gave orders. Ethan breaks. She is not cargo. Ethan snapped, voice breaking through the calm like thunder. You don't get to schedule her fate. The man tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan like one might study a trapped animal lashing out at its cage. Then, slowly, his gaze drifted back to me, and for the first time, there was pity in his eyes. You should have run when I told you, he murmured, and in that moment footsteps sounded, at the far end of the hallway, not hurried, not secretive, measured, commanding, like a queen entering her throne room. Evelyn Cole appears from the shadows of the corridor. Evelyn Cole stepped into the moonlight. Her expression was calm, immaculate, unshakable. She glanced at the man, her operative, clearly, then at Ethan. Then her eyes rested on me. Not with hatred, with decision. It's time, she said. To whom? To me? To him? To everyone? I didn't know. All I knew was this. Tomorrow was no longer a wedding. It was a stage, and someone had just decided who would or wouldn't walk on it. You deserve the truth, but not all of it. Evelyn's heels echoed like a metronome of fate, steady, precise, inevitable. She stopped a few feet away from me, her face poised in that perfect aristocratic calm she wore like a second skin. Her pearls glimmered under the moonlight, as though they too belonged to a bloodline that had never once been told. No, Ethan stood between us, jaw clenched, breathing uneven. But Evelyn didn't look at him. She looked through him, as though he, too, had become expendable. Step aside, Ethan. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command. It was simply truth spoken aloud, a truth that assumed obedience. Mother, Ethan's voice cracked. Please, not like this. For the slightest fraction of a second too fast for anyone but her blood to notice something pass through her eyes. Regret? Pain? Perhaps once, long ago. But whatever softness existed in Evelyn Cole had been buried in silk and calculated ambition. She gave him a look, just a glance, and Ethan, despite everything, moved back. Not far. Just enough. Enough to prove one thing. He feared losing me, but he feared defying her more. Evelyn's offer, her eyes found mine again. I lifted my chin. She noticed. Something like respect flickered in the corner of her smile. I expected tears, she said softly. Or denial. You've surprised me. You haven't. Mrs. Cole. My voice came out steady even to my own surprise. You've been preparing this moment since I stepped into your house. Her lips curved slightly, approval, not affection. Smart girls survive longer. She took one single step closer, and then she said the words that carved themselves into my memory like cold steel. You will not marry my son tomorrow, Evelyn said. She paused. But you will walk down that aisle. Silence. A silence that didn't belong to the living. The revelation uncoils. What do you mean? I asked, though some quiet part of me already knew. Evelyn didn't answer. She simply turned and gestured. The glass-eyed man stepped forward, carrying a small velvet box. Not a ring. Box, smaller. Like a token or a seal. He opened it. Inside was not jewelry. It was a signet pin, encrusted with black stone, the crest of the Cole family engraved in silver. A mark of binding. A mark of ownership. You don't need a ring, Evelyn murmured. You need a roll. And then the sentence, tomorrow. You don't become a bride, Evelyn said, her voice smooth and elegant, a queen declaring war with powder on her wrists. You become a Cole, and in this family, she continued, eyes glinting like polished knives. A Cole doesn't marry into power. A Cole inherits it. Cliffhanger choisient. Before I could breathe, before I could demand answers, before I could scream, the man with the glass eyes stepped behind me. Not with hostility, with ceremony, and reached for my hand. As though I were being inducted, not welcomed. Claimed. To enter a kingdom built on blood, one must first learn the price of belonging. Silence held me in place, not the silence of peace, but the kind that existed in tombs, old and echoing, carrying secrets like dust in a forgotten vault. The glass-eyed man didn't grip my hand like a guard. He held it like a witness. His touch was cold, not with cruelty, but with duty. As though his blood had long ago surrendered warmth in exchange for loyal service to the Cole dynasty. The velvet box remained open between us. That black stone pin glinted in the moonlight like an omen. Kneel. The glass-eyed man spoke. His voice was neither loud nor commanding, just final. Ethan inhaled sharply, stepping forward, but Evelyn didn't even turn to him. Ethan, she said softly, if you interfere, you lose her. He froze. That was the moment I realized something startling. Ethan wasn't just afraid of losing me. He already had. Not to a fate. Not to another man, but to the House of Cole. A name that didn't simply own wealth, it owned people. And once claimed, you never truly escaped. The moonlit pledge. I didn't kneel. Not at first. Every instinct in me, every defiance I had forged from years of being told to know my place, to stay quiet, to be grateful for crumbs dressed as blessings, rose up like fire in my veins. You don't own me, I said quietly. My voice was calm. Too calm. Evelyn didn't flinch. Child, she said, perfectly composed, this world was never built for women like you to own anything. You marry in. You serve. You survive. That is the order that holds bloodlines together. I met her gaze, and for the first time, I saw it. Not cruelty. Not malice. Calculation. The kind forged by generations of curated survival, where power wasn't a gift. It was a legacy guarded by velvet gloves and iron laws. The moment that changed everything. Pin in the box wasn't just jewelry. It was a mark of inclusion, and inclusion in a family like this was just another word for possession. Why me? I whispered, not in fear, but in clarity. You could have chosen anyone. For the first time that night, Evelyn stepped closer, close enough that I could see the fine lines around her eyes, not from laughter, but from negotiating power. Because, my dear, she said softly, you're not here to be Ethan's wife. She paused, letting the night swallow her words. You're here to be mine. Her eyes were not cruel, they were sovereign. This was not a threat, it was a coronation, and something inside me awakened not in submission, but in recognition. Power does not welcome. Power brands. The air shifted not with wind, but with expectation. Like the hush before a judge delivers a verdict, Evelyn lifted her hand, and without words, the glass-eyed man released me. It wasn't mercy. It was procedure. He stepped back exactly 3 paces precise. Rehearsed, ritualistic, like every movement had been practiced for generations. In the shadows of moonlit estates and gated legacies, a ritual so old it no longer needed language, only obedience. The circle 3 figures emerged from the shadows of the terrace arches. I hadn't noticed them before, not because they weren't there, but because I wasn't yet meant to see them. They were dressed in black, not modern black, but old-world ceremonial black, the kind reserved for oaths and burials, maybe both. Each wore a small silver crest pinned to their collar, the same crest etched onto the black stone in the velvet box. As they moved, they formed a circle around me, leaving me and Evelyn in the center. I realized then this wasn't a confrontation. It was an initiation. The family Loevelyn spoke not to me but to them. Record. One of the figures, an older man with silver hair slicked back like a diplomat, withdrew a ledger. Not a tablet, not a phone, a ledger, leather-bound, worn by years of careful hands and precise signatures, the kind of book that didn't store names, it stored deals. State it, Evelyn said. The man opened the ledger, dipped a quill-like pen into ink, and said, subject unnamed, status, candidate for binding, sponsoring authority, Evelyn Thorne Cole. Thorne. The name slid like a blade between her first and last name. A maiden name. Or a title? Ethan flinched again. I noticed. Evelyn didn't. Her attention was fixed on me like a queen evaluating a piece on a chessboard, not for beauty, but for utility. The binding oath, you're not marrying my son, Evelyn repeated, but this time, she wasn't speaking to me. She was announcing it. You're being bound to the House of Cole by Thorne authority. Through me, not through Ethan. Ethan took a step forward, raw anger breaking through his composure. Mother, stop. This isn't the 1800s. She's a person, not a resource. Evelyn finished calmly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. That is exactly why she is being bound to me and not to you. Because you, her voice lowered to something almost like disappointment, have forgotten what it takes to hold an empire. His jaw locked. The House of Cole, I had heard those words before. In whispers, on headlines, in lawsuits settled out of court, in rumors dismissed as conspiracy. But tonight, those rumors wore pearls and walked in designer heels, kneel or be dismissed. Evelyn's voice no longer held threat, only certainty. A certainty carved from generations of perfected control. The circle of black-clad witnesses watched, ledger open, ink waiting. Ethan's breath hitched not at Evelyn's command, but at my silence, because he saw it. I wasn't trembling anymore. I was calculating. Not because I wanted to belong to them, but because, in that moment, I understood something chilling and clear. To destroy a dynasty, one must first walk through its doors. The velvet box remained in Evelyn's hand, unclosed. Bloodlines do not accept. They absorb. The night air settled heavy around us, as though even the moon held its breath. The black-clad witnesses stood still, not people, but rolls. The ledger stayed open, ink glistening under candlelight from the terrace sconces. Evelyn didn't move. She waited. I realized then the House of Cole never rushed. Power, to them, wasn't a force. It was gravity. Everything sooner or later fell in line. The blood seal Velen extended the velvet box toward me. But she didn't offer it. She simply held it like a question. Step forward, she said softly, almost politely. I didn't move. Not because I was afraid, because I was listening. Something about the air around us felt too ceremonial to be just about me marrying Ethan. This wasn't a wedding tradition. It was older. A legacy ritual. One designed to mark not love but control. What happens if I walk away? I asked. Ethan's head snapped toward me, desperate hope flickering in his eyes. Evelyn answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then you walk away. She paused, elegant, poised, unaffiliated, unprotected, unnamed. Her eyes glinted, sharp as polished ice. And when the world comes for you as it will, you will face it alone. The hidden truth. Ethan's voice broke through, jagged, raw. Mother, she doesn't need your name to survive? Evelyn turned to him slowly. Ethan, she doesn't understand yet. Her gaze returned to me. You think this is about society, about status, about being accepted by my family? She stepped closer, her voice lowering, not in threat, but in confidence. But this is not about us wanting you. Her next word sliced through the night like a blade. This is about others wanting what is yours. My heart thudded. What do you mean? She studied my face as though measuring how much to reveal. Then she said it, calm, precise. You carry something. A claim. A claim to what? My breath caught. A claim? The ledger keeper's pen lifted off the page, ready. Evelyn nodded once. Not by birth. Not by marriage. By blood debt. The phrase felt heavy, ritualistic, with history wrapped around it like chains. Blood debt. Something old. Sealed in agreements written before the world watched everything online. Someone owed the house of Cole, she said quietly, and payment was promised. In living form. She tilted her head, the moonlight catching the sharp lines of her cheekbones, casting her in a silhouette of sovereign coldness. That payment, she said, voice almost tender, is you. Some debts are not written in contracts. They are carved into blood. The world felt too still, like the moment right before thunder cleaves the sky. I could hear my own heartbeat. Not out of fear, out of recognition. Evelyn didn't blink, didn't soften. She spoke like a woman accustomed to being history's architect, not its witness. The House of Cole funded a man once, she said. Many years ago. Ethan's gaze flickered to her, wary, confused. This wasn't in the version of the story he was told. He came to us desperate, helpless, looking for salvation. Evelyn's eyes never left mine. And we granted it at a cost. Something inside me clenched. Who? My voice was barely a whisper. Evelyn stepped closer, so close I could see my reflection in her eyes. He signed under blood, not with ink. In exchange for his life, he bound his heir to our house. She paused, letting silence echo like a drumbeat. You were not born free, a name buried in silence. My chest tightened. There was only one person in my life desperate enough, cornered enough, swallowed by poverty enough to sign anything if it meant survival. My voice cracked like dry earth. My father? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She turned to the ledger keeper. State the debtor, she commanded. The man flipped a page in the ledger, scanning lines written in a hand too elegant to be anything but deliberate. Then he spoke the name slowly, as though invoking a contract from the grave. Marcus Hale. I felt the name like a knife under my ribs. Not just father. Marcus Hale, the name he used before he ran. The past I was never meant to know. Me knees trembled, not from weakness, from memory. My father's voice in the dark, whispering, forgive me, little queen. The way he looked at me, sometimes as if I were treasure, and other times as if I were a ticking clock, something I never understood. Until now. He didn't abandon you, Evelyn said, her voice composed, almost gentle. He delivered you, not to safety. To them. The final self. Glass-eyed man stepped forward again, the velvet box still open. Kneel, Evelyn said, her tone neither cruel nor kind. Not as a bride. The witnesses leaned in, ink ready. As payment. To control the air, they first shaped the sacrifice. I did not kneel. Not yet. Not out of defiance, but out of something far more dangerous, awareness. The kind that shifts your heartbeat. Not faster but deeper. Ethan stood just beyond the circle, breathing hard like a man watching history fold in on itself. His hands were clenched, but he didn't move. Not because he didn't want to, because he couldn't. This wasn't his realm. This was hers. Evelyn's gaze held mine with unsettling calm. Do you know why he chose you? She asked. For a moment, a flicker of confusion crossed Ethan's face. What? He began, but Evelyn lifted a hand, elegant, dismissive. Your father. Her tone was quiet. Do you know why he delivered you? A whirlwind of buried memories flooded my mind. My father's constant urgency, his sudden disappearances. The money always just enough to get by, then gone like smoke. How he never looked anyone from the Cole lineage directly in the eye. As though he were already owned. The selection was never yours. You think you fell in love by chance? Evelyn asked, and there was no mockery in her voice, only clinical truth. You think Ethan saw you and chose you? Ethan stepped forward again, fists tight. Stop talking like she's a pawn. Evelyn finished smoothly. She turned back to me. My son may have loved you honestly, but love has never been a requirement for binding the chosen. She approached, steps slow, voice lower like a confession sharpened into a blade. Your father didn't stumble into our world. He was brought to it. And when he begged, her gaze sharpened. He was told how to repay. The groom was never the master of Lynn looked at Ethan not with hatred, with pity. Ethan, my son, she said softly, you believed love made you powerful, that choosing her made you a rebellion. Ethan's breath caught torn between anger and grief. But she was never yours to choose. Those words hit him harder than a slap. I watched it crack through him, not because Evelyn was cruel, but because she had engineered this moment with precision. To break him? No. To awaken him. The moment of alignment. Evelyn turned back to me, her eyes not unkind but firm, unyielding. You were placed near him, guided into his orbit. Watched, measured, groomed. Her voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and cold. Not to marry Ethan. The circle of witnesses straightened, ink glistened, the ledger remained open, waiting for one word. You were never meant to be a bride. You were meant to be. She let the final word hang like an executioner raising the blade. A successor. They weren't searching for a bride. They were searching for a weapon. Successor. The word thundered through my chest. Not bride. Not wife. Successor. It echoed with something ancient, not romantic, not familial, strategic. The circle around me tightened. Not with movement but with attention. Like predators pausing, curious, sensing a shift in the hunt. Ethan looked between his mother and me, confusion threading with hurt. Successor? He muttered, disbelief cracking his voice. What are you talking about? I'm your heir. He said it like a truth he had always worn, entitled, maybe, but innocent in its certainty. Evelyn didn't even look at him. You are my son, she replied, but a Cole heir must be more than blood. The Empire's quiet truth. Evelyn stepped into the center of the circle, joining me in the space where ritual and revelation met. You see this estate? These witnesses? This ledger? She gestured, every movement precise. The world believes the Coles own their empire through wealth. Her expression hardened, shifting into something colder. We do not. A heavy silence followed, the kind that rewrites everything you thought you knew. We hold power because each generation chooses not the most loved, but the most useful. She looked at Ethan finally, directly. And you, for all your heart, your compassion, your rebellion. Soft pause. A mother's breath. You were never built to rule like a Cole. The rift between blood and throne. Ethan shook his head, voice shaking with a mix of grief and rising fury. So what? You brought her here to replace me? Evelyn's expression didn't flicker. Not replace. Her eyes found mine. Fulfill. The house chooses those who understand hunger, who understand being unseen, unvalued, underestimated. She moved closer. Power is not inherited by comfort, Ethan. It is inherited by resilience. Her eyes stayed on me as she continued, and she was born knowing the world does not hand crowns to women like her. That makes her sharper. A slow breath escaped her, as if admitting this cost her something. You were raised to believe you already had a crown. That makes you softer. A dynasty needs teeth, ledger keeper spoke, then voice dry like ancient parchment. The coal legacy falls not to the firstborn. The witnesses echoed in one voice, ritualistic, chilling, but to the one who can hold it without trembling. Ethan took a step back. Not in fear, in recognition. For the first time he saw what his mother had built him to be, and what she had built me to become. The final question before Bind and Jevlin looked at me, and this time there was something new in her eyes, not dominance, expectation. You can walk away now, she said. Leave Ethan, leave this house, reject the ledger, and you will live a small life. Her gaze sharpened like cut glass. Or, the velvet box waited. The ledger waited. Fate waited. Inherit the empire that once bought your blood and bend it in your name. To seize a throne, first you must kneel, not in surrender, but in strategy. Her words hovered between us like a blade suspended in midair, waiting to decide whether it would crown or cut. Inherit the empire, Evelyn said, and bend it in your name. Inheritance. Not just of wealth, but of debt, betrayal, legacy, and power. The velvet box remained open, the black stone crest glinting like a sigil of allegiance. The ledger stayed waiting, one blank line beneath my father's debt entry. A line meant for my name. Ethan Brake's mother. Stop this. Ethan's voice cracked, raw, human, aching. He moved forward as though to shield me. One of the witnesses stepped between us, swift, silent, trained. Ethan froze, not because he feared them, but because I didn't move behind him. For the first time, he realized I didn't need protecting. I needed the truth. The question Evelyn did not ask. He looked at Evelyn, at the woman who had orchestrated every step that led me here. Why me? She had many answers: empire, blood, debt, legacy. But those weren't the reasons I needed to hear, and she knew it. Because your father wasn't supposed to owe us. Her voice softened almost to a whisper. He was supposed to lead us. The world tilted. What? The name that was never spoken of. Lynn looked at the ledger keeper. He opened an older page. One yellowed by age. Slanted handwriting. Dried ink. I saw it. Marcus Thornhale. Thorn. The same name Evelyn carried between hers. He wasn't just a debtor. Evelyn's voice was low, reverent, almost haunted. He was chosen, just like you are now, my father. Chosen. Not as a sacrifice, but as an heir. But he ran. She continued. He rejected the crest, rejected the binding. He took what was meant to be his throne and he fled. I stared at the open ledger, my father's name staring back like a ghost. Why? Evelyn's expression hardened, a rare crack in her perfect composure. Because he loved someone more than he loved power. The shadow appears. Who? I whispered. A shift in the shadows. One of the witnesses stepped forward but did not remove their hood. From beneath the darkness, a familiar scent, a faint tremor in their breath. Something deep inside me stirred, a memory of childhood, of being watched, protected from afar. My pulse slowed. Who are you? No answer, until Evelyn spoke deliberately. The one your father left behind to ensure your path would one day return. A cold wind brushed across the terrace, or maybe it was my blood going still. Sometimes the past doesn't die. It waits, cloaked, silent, watching who you become. The hooded figure stepped closer. Slow. Measured. As if reality itself was hesitant to let this moment happen. The witnesses parted like guards opening a ceremonial path. The ledger keeper bowed his head slightly, but not to Evelyn. To them. My heartbeat wasn't fast, it was heavy. Like each thud was pushing against something ancient lodged in my chest. Remove it, Evelyn commanded softly. Black gloved fingers reached up. The hood fell back. The face beneath the hoodie forgot how to breathe. No. Time stopped. There are moments in life when your soul recognizes something before your mind does. When your bones whisper a name before your lips can form it. This was one of those moments. Silver at the temples. A scar cutting across the jaw, old, well healed. Eyes dark, intense, and achingly familiar. Not because I knew him, but because I had his eyes. You. The man looked at me like someone who had been waiting a lifetime to be allowed to finally look directly at the sun. Evelyn spoke like a judge delivering a verdict that had been written long before any of us were born. Meet the one who watched your life from the shadows. Marcus Hale's blood. Your blood? The one who never left. I didn't speak, because my mind refused to understand. But my blood already had. Say it, Evelyn whispered. You know who he is. The word formed on instinct, ancestral, inevitable. Uncle. The blood kept in shadow, his voice deep, restrained, carrying years of swallowed truths, broke the air. I was never meant to guide him. I was meant to guide you. Guidance. Protection. The presence I felt as a child, watching from a distance. The man I once saw standing across the street on a rainy night. The handkerchief left on our doorstep when I was sick. The unmarked car outside our house on every birthday. It was never a coincidence. Why? My voice was no longer steady, it shook with something deeper than fear. He looked at Evelyn, then back at me. Because your father ran from the throne, but you, his eyes locked on mine. You were born to take it. The crest still lay between us. The ledger still waited for my name. My father, once a chosen heir, ran. This man, his own blood, stayed behind to ensure I wouldn't. I looked at them all, Evelyn, Ethan, the silent witnesses, the ledger keeper, and for the first time, I felt the throne breathe beneath the dirt. Before you claim a throne, you must understand the grave it was built on. They say every empire begins with a crown. They're wrong. It begins with a secret, a lie carefully buried, wrapped in gold and silence, passed down like a family heirloom. That night, under the quiet cruelty of moonlight, I realized my life had never belonged to me. The ledger, the crest, the witnesses, all of it was not an invitation, but a summoning. The room of silent oaths. Evelyn gestured toward the double doors at the far end of the terrace. It's time, she said, her tone calm, but laced with ceremonial gravity. You cannot inherit what you do not understand. The witnesses moved in precision, forming a silent procession. Ethan remained where he stood, eyes on me, jaw clenched with unspoken fear. My uncle walked a step behind me, like a shadow reclaimed by its source. The doors opened, releasing a low hum like a cathedral breathing. Inside, candlelight glowed against black stone walls. Long banners bearing the family crest hung like silent judges, and at the center a stone table, carved with names, names crossed out, names erased, names left to stand alone. I looked for one, Marcus Thornhale. My father. It was there, not crossed out, not erased, just unfinished. The oathkeeper speaks. A woman stood beside the stone table, older than Evelyn, her presence commanding as winter. Her voice did not need volume to carry power. State your name. I lifted my chin, not out of arrogance, but out of defiance against a destiny written without my consent. I am, she cut through the air with a cold, precise gesture. Not what they call you. Who you are. Who I am. Not what society named me. Not what love carved me into. Not what pain reduced me to. But who I am. For a single moment time, stilled. And I spoke. Slow, deliberate, a declaration. I am the daughter of Marcus Hale, and I have come to reclaim what was denied to my blood. The room shifted, not physically, but spiritually, like the walls themselves acknowledged my claim. Evelyn smiled, proud, and Danger Sufslin stepped forward, not as an executioner, but as a queen acknowledging another. Good, she murmured, because this empire does not accept the hesitant, only the inevitable. Then she touched a stone beside my father's name, and for the first time, I saw it. The space beneath his lineage was empty, waiting for me. But crowns are never free. Me uncle finally spoke, his voice steady, heavy with warning. Before you bind your name here, know this. I turned to him. His eyes, the ones I shared, were filled not with triumph, but sorrow. The one who signs that stone, he looked directly into my soul, can no longer love freely. A silence fell. Ethan, standing just outside the chamber doors, tensed. My heartbeat echoed in my ears like a distant drum. My uncle continued, voice lower now. almost tender. Thrones are not inherited through love, only through loss. Some legacies are not passed down. They are carved into flesh and fate. For a moment, I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breath, soft, steady, yet strangely distant, as if it no longer belonged to me. Commit your name to the stone, and lose the right to love freely. The oath keeper extended a ceremonial blade. Its edge blackened, not silver forged not to shine, but to absorb light. Every air bleeds, she said, her tone unwavering. To bind your name is to sacrifice the freedom of your heart. I looked toward Ethan. He stood motionless, not because he did not care, but because he finally understood what this truly was. Not a ceremony. A sentence. What the stone demands me. Uncle stepped forward, his footsteps echoing like a verdict. This stone is more than record, he said, his hand grazing its ancient surface. It does not just hold names. It holds vows. Vows. Not romantic vows, but blood oaths. Once your name is carved, your loyalty belongs here. Meaning? My voice was cold, steady. My uncle didn't flinch. Meaning this, he looked toward Ethan. If love ever stands between you and this empire, you must choose the empire. A throne built on abandonment. Is that why my father left? Silence. But silence was an answer. He loved someone too much to let this place take him, my uncle finally said, his voice roughened by old grief. My mother. The words came out as both realization and accusation. Evelyn didn't deny it. She simply lifted her gaze to the stone. He chose love, and love made him weak. Something flared inside me, not anger. Not yet. But warning. Weak? I repeated, dangerously calm. Evelyn's eyes met mine, not cruel, but unyielding. Love does not build empires. Fear does. Legacy does. Power does. And what about humanity? I asked. She did not blink. Humanity, she said softly, is a luxury for those without crowns. The moment of choosing, ceremonial blade was placed in my hand, cold, heavier than any weapon I'd ever touched, not in metal, but in meaning. The stone surface waited, ancient and patient. My father's name glowed faintly, unfinished, a space beneath it blank, hungry. Say your name, the oath keeper said. I closed my eyes, in the darkness behind my eyelids. I saw two paths. One, a quiet life, a house on a hill, marriage, a future free of blood and stone. Ethan's world, the other, shadow, crown, power, and the cold solitude of legacy, my father's unfinished empire. I lifted the blade, my voice steady, regal. I am. Ethan stepped forward. Stop. Everyone turned. His voice cut through the chamber like a sudden crack of thunder. If she speaks her name, she becomes yours. His gaze burned at Evelyn, at the witnesses, at fate itself. But understand this, he looked at me then, and his voice softened, aching. If she gives her name, she stops being mine. A name spoken is a life surrendered. Once carved, it cannot be reclaimed. Ethan's words still trembled in the air. If she gives her name, she stops being mine. He didn't say it as a threat. He said it as truth. A truth that didn't beg, it bled. The chamber felt colder. Even Evelyn, who commanded entire rooms with her silence, paused, studying Ethan with new calculation. My uncle watched me carefully, as though weighing not just my decision, but my soul. And then, just as I opened my mouth to speak, someone else spoke my name first, the voice that shouldn't have been there. Her name is Althea Hale. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't come from Ethan, not from Evelyn, not from my uncle, not from the oath keeper. It came from the entrance of the chamber. Slow footsteps echoed across the stone. I turned, and my world tilted. A ghost walks in. He stood there, brown skin, pale from illness, hair longer, darker, eyes familiar in a way that stabbed through 5 years of grief like a blade. Adrian. The name tore through my chest, raw, disbelieving. For a heartbeat I couldn't breathe, because the man standing at the threshold looked like him, but not entirely. He was alive, but not the man who once promised me a future. There was something colder now, something shaped by captivity, not death. Evelyn did not look surprised, not even a flicker of shock. You're late, she said calmly. My heart does not know how to beat. Room spun. Somewhere far away, someone said my name again, not as a claim, but as a memory. Adrian, or the man who once was Adrian, looked directly at me and smiled. Not with love, with recognition. I told you once, he said softly, voice scarred by something I couldn't name. No matter where I go, I belong to your name. My hand, the one holding the blade, trembled, not from fear, from betrayal, because something in his eyes told me the truth before he ever spoke it. He wasn't just back. He had always belonged to them. Evelyn's final seal. Evelyn stepped forward slightly, her voice a whisper only the room could hear. You asked once what broke your father. She turned toward Adrian, toward their witness. Now you know. My blood went cold. My father fled because someone he trusted stood on their side. Just like now. Just like Adrian. Some men don't vanish. They are taken, reshaped, and returned as weapons. Adrian, the man I once loved, the man I mourned, stepped fully into the chamber. The torches along the walls flickered, as though the flames themselves shuddered at his presence. He was breathing. He was standing. But the man I knew was gone. You disappeared. I whispered, my voice hollow. They said your body was never found. A slow, haunted smile traced his lips. That's because a body cannot be found when it has been claimed. He looked past me, not at Ethan, not at Evelyn. At the stone. The night he was taken, the night before our wedding, he said, turning toward me fully. I received a letter, not to threaten me, to summon me. Summon. Not kidnap. Summon. His gaze flicked toward Evelyn, not with hatred, but with loyalty. I thought I could refuse. A bitter echo of laughter escaped him. But you don't refuse a bloodline debt. Not one tied to the Hale name. My name. My father's name. What debt? Evelyn answered, not with cruelty, but with a surgeon's precision. Your father ran. He broke his oath. The bond requires blood. She looked at Adrian. In absence of the heir, the oath took him. The price of love. Adrian's eyes, once warm, now glinted with something sharp. I didn't vanish, Althea. His voice softened on my name, like a ghost brushing against a memory. I was taken in your place. Taken. For me. You had a life ahead of you, he continued. A future untouched by this. I loved you enough to take the vow your father broke. My breath caught. No, I said, too late, too human. You should have told me. He shook his head slowly. If I had, you would have followed me. And love does not belong here. Evelyn's earlier words echoed again. Humanity is a luxury for those without crowns. A throne of ashes. Adrian stepped toward the stone table, toward my father's name. He touched it, reverently, almost lovingly. I was not enough to take his place, he said. The stone rejected me. I was a placeholder, a debt awaiting its rightful heir. His eyes met mine. You. Something broke inside me, but not like glass. Like chain links snapping free. Ethan moves enough. Ethan said, stepping between Adrian and me. His voice no longer just protective. It was possessive. If she signs that stone, she loses her freedom. If she listens to you, she loses her past. Adrian's eyes darkened. She lost her past the moment she was born into that name. The blade waits. The ceremonial blade was still in my hand. The stone still waited. My father ran from this. Adrian bled for it. Evelyn built it. My uncle guarded it. Ethan feared it. And now it wanted me. Speak your full name, the oath keeper whispered, and everything will change. There comes a moment when a woman stops being someone's daughter, someone's lover, and becomes her own legend. The blade in my hand felt heavier than steel. It pulls not with magic, but with history. 1,000 unnamed heirs had stood where I stood. Some carved their names and died kings. Some refused and lived ghosts. And now, it was my turn. The circle formed. Evelyn lifted her chin. The witnesses moved, forming a wide circle around the stone slab, a ring of judgment and legacy. Adrian stood on one side of me, marked by sacrifice. Ethan stood on the other, marked by love. My uncle remained behind me, the weight of bloodline secret in his eyes. Evelyn remained in front, the throne personified. Speak your name, she commanded. The oath keeper lifted the blade higher, like the start of a coronation or an execution. The war inside Memi future began to split in two. If I speak my name, if I remain silent, gain a throne. I keep my heart. I inherit power. I inherit freedom. I lose love. I lose destiny. I become legend. I remain human, and that was the truth no one ever admits. To rule is to bleed out of love. Adrian speaks first, say it. Adrian murmured softly, but his voice held steel. Finish what your father could not. There was longing in his tone, but it was no longer the longing of a man in love. It was the hunger of a man who believed in destiny more than devotion. Ethan, the last stand of love, don't, Ethan said, stepping closer, his hand hovering near mine, but not touching. You don't have to prove anything to them. Walk away. Choose us. Us. That single word cut deeper than any blade. Ethan didn't understand, or maybe he did, and hated it. Empires do not allow us. Only I, my uncle's first plea. Me uncle, the silent watcher of my life, finally touched my shoulder. It wasn't forceful. It was broken. If you choose power, he said quietly, you will never know peace. I turned slightly, eyes meeting his. Did my father find peace? Pain flickered through his gaze. No, did you? His jaw clenched, and that was answer enough. Evelyn, the crown's whisper, peace is not for women like us, Evelyn said, her voice low, intimate, like a confession shared only between two queens. We are not born for soft endings. We are born to carve our own names into stone, so that no one can ever erase us. Her words were fire and poison, both seductive and cruel. And then I lifted the blade. The circle held its breath. My lips parted, my name aloud. Sharp sound cut through the chamber, the sound of doors being thrown open with violence. A voice, breathless, panicked, rushed through like a storm. Stop. You can't carve her name. The witnesses turned sharply. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Someone new entered the chamber, holding a document sealed with the Hale family crest but stained with blood. Truth does not always arrive as prophecy. Sometimes it crashes in, screaming and bleeding. The doors slammed against the stone walls as the intruder staggered into the circle of witnesses. He was dressed in dark, formal attire, but torn at the shoulder, blood smeared across his sleeve. In his hand a scroll, sealed with the Hale crest, but the wax was cracked and fresh blood streaked across it, as though it had been ripped from the hands of someone who did not want it delivered. Every head turned, Evelyn's eyes sharp and cold, assessing. My uncle tensed, recognizing something I didn't. Ethan moved closer to me, a silent barrier. Adrian stepped forward, not in protection, but in recognition. Hold. The intruder gasped, his voice shaking. She cannot sign the stone. The oath keeper freezes, clutching the scroll like it was both shield and curse. The man fell to one knee. By ancient rite of blood reversal, I invoke Clause 17 of the Hale Covenant. The room shifted. A ripple of unease moved through the witnesses. Blood reversal. Two words that sent a shock through Evelyn's usually unbreakable composure. For the first time since I met her, Evelyn looked alarmed. Who sent you? She demanded. The man lifted his head. Marcus Hale. My blood ran cold. That's impossible, my uncle muttered. He's dead. The scroll trembled in the intruder's hand. He anticipated his death. This was written the night he vanished. The blood-stamped self-intruder extended the scroll toward me. His hand shook not from fear, but from urgency. The heir's blood cannot be written in stone. His gaze locked onto mine. Until she knows the truth of the bond she is being forced to inherit. The oath keeper looked to Evelyn. Evelyn did not speak, which meant for the first time she could not stop this. The scroll opens. Wax broke in my hand with a soft crack. The sound somehow louder than thunder. Inside a single sheet of parchment, my father's handwriting. Bold, slanted, determined. I read, to the one who will bear my name. Know that I did not flee out of fear. I fled because the empire I was meant to lead was not built on legacy. My hands trembled. It was built on a lie. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. Evelyn's face hardened, not with guilt, but with fury. My father's warning: if my bloodline continues, it must not continue on their throne. Not until the truth buried beneath the Hale dynasty is unearthed. To my heir, if you sign before uncovering it, you do not inherit power. You inherit chains. The final line hit like a storm. They do not want an heir. They want a prisoner with a crown. The scroll slipped from my fingers. Silence descended, crushing, holy, revelatory, and in that silence Evelyn finally spoke. Slow, lethal, controlled. Remove him. The intruder was seized instantly by two witnesses. Ethan moved fast, too fast to step between them, but Adrian caught his arm, not aggressively, but like someone who already knew what was coming next. Truth, when cornered, does not surrender. It strikes back. The temperature in the chamber shifted the moment Evelyn spoke. Not colder, not warmer, just sharper. Like the air itself had grown teeth. The intruder was dragged toward the exit, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. He died for you to know, he whispered, voice breaking as he was pulled away. Do not let them bury it. That single sentence ripped something open inside me, something raw, something old, something that felt like recognition. Evelyn steps forward slowly, gracefully, as though this was merely an inconvenient delay in a schedule she meticulously planned. Evelyn Hale turned to face me. You will ignore that. Her voice was soft, soft like a knife with silk wrapped around it. You will sign. Now. The oath stone shimmered, waiting, hungry. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself beside me. Adrian did not move, but his posture shifted, just slightly, like a wolf changing its stance before a strike. The council watches, dozens of eyes, witnesses, allies, enemies, all bound by law to watch but not interfere. By Hale law, Evelyn said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. A blood reversal cannot proceed unless challenged formally. She looked at me, and I realized with a sudden punch of clarity she wanted me to speak. To challenge, to break the silent oath structure. So that when she crushed me, it would be legal. A public trap. You accused the House of Hale of deception? Evelyn asked, addressing me now, but speaking for the witnesses. Then say it. Here, before the stone. Gasps echoed. My uncle's jaw tightened. Ethan whispered, do not speak. That's the challenge she wants. But before I could respond, Adrian moved. He stepped forward. Calm, controlled, deadly. Then I challenge. Shock ripples through the hell. Every head snapped in his direction. Evelyn's eyes widened, not in fear, but in disbelief. Adrian. Her voice was no longer silk. It was steel. He met her gaze with a polite, almost bored expression, the kind of expression only someone born inside a dynasty could wear in the face of a storm. I invoke witness clause. His eyes turn to me. She will not stand alone. The stone reacts. The oath stone, dormant until now, flared with sudden light, ancient runes igniting in spirals. The chamber door sealed shut. And no one could leave. No one could interfere. A formal challenge had been placed. Evelyn stepped back, not in fear, in calculation. For the first time, I saw a crack in her control. Very well, she whispered. Then let truth bleed. When the chamber sealed, it wasn't just a trial. It was an awakening. The doors slammed shut behind us, not with force, but with finality. The sound echoed like a heartbeat against stone. The oath stone began to pulse, ancient runes flickering like embers trapped beneath ice. All movement is now recorded. A disembodied voice, old, metallic, ceremonial, resonated from the ceiling. All words bound, all blood witnessed. The room was no longer a hall. It was a trial cage. Evelyn halts the guards with a single gesture. Rethi obeyed instantly, without speaking, without looking at them, like their loyalty was not earned but engineered into their bones. She faced Adrian. You shouldn't have spoken. Her tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Adrian, calm, composed, every inch the untouchable Hale heir, gave a slight tilt of his head. You broke your own law first. A ripple spread through the chamber. Someone in the crowd whispered, impossible. Another hissed, he's provoking her. The law beneath their Lawadrian spoke not loudly, but every word struck like a bell. Hale House Law Revision Chamber 9 Subsection on Forced Oath Proceedings. Evelyn's face tightened. Only a rightful Hale by blood may invoke that clause, she said slowly. You carry Blackwood blood, Adrian. Not Hale. A silence. Then a revelation. Adrian's expression did not shift, but something ancient and cold entered his voice. My mother was Evelyn Hale's sister. The crowd reacted like lightning striking water. Voices broke out, whispers sharp as knives. That makes him an heir. He outranks Ethan. Ethan stiffened, not in jealousy, but in realization. Evelyn's mask breaks just for a moment, a crack. Subtle, but I saw it. Her fingers curled not in rage, but in control. She was recalculating. You were never to speak of that bloodline. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning spoken like a woman who had buried history herself. Adrian didn't flinch. Then you should not have forced her. He looked at me, and for the first time since I met him, he looked mortal. She has rights you hope she never discovered. All eyes shift to my felt it. The chamber didn't just wait, it demanded. Something in the stone called to me, a deep thrum, like roots beneath the earth remembering a forgotten name. Step forward, a voice whispered in my mind. Speak, claim what was stolen. In silence, my pulse matched a stone's glow. For the first time, I felt not like a witness, but like a force. Evelyn watched me, her gaze calm, but wary, like she was no longer certain which role I would choose, pawn or flame. The moment I stepped forward, the chamber didn't see me as a victim. It recognized me as a variable, a disruption. The room stood in perfect, predatory silence as I took a step toward the oath stone. Not even the air dared move. My pulse hammered through my veins like marching drums. Not in fear, not in panic, in alignment, as though something inside me had nodded and said, finally. The stone reacts. The closer I walked, the stronger the vibration beneath my feet became, like the floor itself remembered old blood. Not their blood. Mine. The oath stone shimmered, but not in the cold light it held for Evelyn or Adrian. For me, it glowed warm. Identity? The same disembodied ceremonial voice echoed through the chamber. I opened my mouth, but Evelyn spoke first. She holds no lineage. Her tone was clean, surgical. She's an outsider to Hale law. Her words struck like a lash, not because they hurt, but because everyone expected me to bow to them. Ethan steps closer. His voice was quiet, but it trembled with something between restraint and rage. She was to marry into Hale blood. That alone grants an invitation. Evelyn cut through, eyes still on me. Not a claim. The chamber murmured, whispers like ripples. She's right. Without signature. She has no name in their records. Then who does the stone belong to? Adrian speaks truth that should have stayed buried. Her blood was already registered once. The world shifted. Evelyn's eyes snapped to him. You overstepped the day your son vanished, Adrian continued, voice calm but laced with ice. She bled on Hale land. The stone took recognition. My breath hitched recognition. Not acceptance. Something older, rooted, binding. Flashes of that night flickered behind my eyes, blood on gravel, rain on skin, a whisper in the dark that I thought was grief, but now I wondered if it was Hale land whispering back. I met Evelyn's gaze. Her face was still, but her eyes, she knew. The stone speaks again. Identity? The voice rang out louder, more insistent. I placed my hand on the stone. It was scorching. Not with heat, with memory. I am not his wife. My voice didn't break. It didn't even waver. But I am not nameless. Silence. Then the stone flared, a pulse that shook the chamber like thunder trapped in crystal. Witnesses gasped. Recognition acknowledged. The voice declared. And in that moment I felt something click in the unseen architecture of power around me. Not acceptance. Not belonging. Presence. I was no longer a bystander to their dynasty. I had entered their ledger. When the stone spoke my name, it wasn't giving me identity. It was returning something that had been stolen. The oath stone pulsed beneath my palm, not just light, but heartbeat. A rhythm that did not belong to Hale blood, nor to Blackwood. Something older, something erased. The chamber waited. Evelyn did not blink. The stone speaks, blood match detected. Searching ancestral record. The runes shifted. lines rearranging like serpents awakening beneath glass. A hush. Then, registry recovered. House the chamber lights flickered. Evelyn's hand shot out like lightning. Override. The command cracked like a whip through the room, echoing off stone and bone. But the oath stone did not dim. Instead, it glowed brighter. The stone rejects. Her override declined. Ancestral claim predates Hail directive. The words landed like a blade severing a bloodline. Gasps rippled through the chamber this time, unrestrained. Predates Hail directive? Then her bloodline is older, impossible. Evelyn's jaw tightened, a barely perceptible motion, but in someone so controlled. It was a scream, a name the Hales wanted, forgotten. Stone pulsed again. Rising, calling. Registry found. Ancestral line. House of, and that's when it happened. The ground cracked beneath the oath stone, tiny fractures like veins of lightning, not breaking. Unsealing. Evelyn speaks low. Too low for anyone but me and Adrian. Do not let it speak that name. Her eyes were not angry now. They were afraid. For the first time, I saw true fear in the woman who had twisted laws like silk threads around people's throats. Adrian saw it too. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw confirmation. Let it finish, he said. The stone burns. It wasn't lie. It was memory. And in it, I saw flashes. Women in black veils signing a pact in blood. A house marked not by crest, but by a flame symbol carved into oak. A child, a girl being carried away under moonlight, while a voice whispered, "Hide her, bury her blood. Let them believe she belongs to no one." My heart stopped. That child was me. The stone declares ancestral name. House of Evelyn moved. Not to stop it. Not to fight it. She dropped to one knee. The chamber exploded in uproar. She's kneeling. Evelyn Hale kneeling? What house outranks Hale? My uncle grabbed Ethan's arm, stunned. Adrian stepped forward, watching Evelyn with a gaze that was no longer polite. It was predatory. Evelyn's voice quiet, raw, cut through the noise. Do not say that name aloud. Not an order. A plea. Some names are not spoken. They are unleashed. Do not speak that name aloud. Evelyn's voice trembled, not with weakness, but with contained history. The oath stone glowing like molten memory pulsed beneath my hand. Registry locked. Ancestral house name queued for release. The runes spiraled, symbols folding over each other like wings closing around fire. The chamber did not breathe. Neither did I. Evelyn stands, but not in power. She rose slowly from her kneeling position, her composure returning piece by precise piece, but it was not the same mask. No, this mask had cracks. She looked at Adrian. Not me. Adrian, you knew. Her words were not accusation. They were confirmation of betrayal. Adrian inclined his head once. You taught me to read what others overlook. A pause. I read her. A secret written in silence. Evelyn's eyes flickered to me, and in that one look, I understood something I had never considered. She had never hated me. She had recognized me, and recognition, in dynasties like theirs, was more dangerous than blood. The stone begins the name ancestral house. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her eyes turned to the witnesses, to the council, the guards, the silent vultures who had come to watch a woman stripped of identity. Leave. No one moved. She didn't shout. She didn't raise her tone. She simply said it again, softer. Leave, all of you. And this time, they obeyed, even the council, even the guards. Only 5 people remained in the chamber. Evelyn Hale, the woman who rewrote bloodlines. Adrian, the heir who betrayed silence. Ethan, breathing like he had just discovered he'd been living inside a lie. My uncle, who looked at me like he was seeing someone he should have remembered. Me, with my hand on the stone, as it prepared to speak a name that would rewrite the board. The doors seal again, but quieter. Like a tomb close. Evelyn finally turned to face me fully. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. If it speaks that name, you won't be hidden anymore. Her eyes, cold blue like winter sky, met mine. Do you understand what it means to hold a name that even Hale blood kneels to? The stone throbbed under my palm like a living heart. Ancestral house. I did not break eye contact with her. Let it speak. Evelyn's final warning. He vanished, she said suddenly, and my blood froze. Your fiancé. He vanished the night before your wedding because that was the last night anyone could stop this. The room leaned inward around her words. They didn't take him to hurt you. Her gaze pierced through me. They took him to stop you. Some truths are not spoken to be understood. They are spoken to fracture the world. They didn't take him to hurt you. They took him to stop you. Evelyn's words hit like a breach in a dam, flooding everything I thought I knew with a cold, merciless clarity. Ethan's breath caught. Adrian didn't move. My uncle slowly looked away, as if the weight of those words had found his spine first. The stone speaks but pauses. Ancestral house. The runes flicker. Once, twice. Then still. Waiting. Not an error. A choice. Evelyn walks closer. Not as a matriarch, but as a historian of war. She stood across the stone from me, not attacking, not defensive, but like someone standing before a grave she helped dig. Your wedding, she began, was never meant to happen. She said it like a fact, not cruelty. That day was not the union of love. It was the final moment before your blood woke. My pulse thundered. Woke? I asked, my voice low. The night before the wedding, the pact. Evelyn's eyes did not leave mine. The Hell Council signed a pact the night before your wedding. She looked at Ethan. Your father signed it. So did his father. Ethan staggered back like he'd been struck. No, he whispered. He signed because he believed, Evelyn continued, that extracting her fiancé and altering his identity would be enough to halt her blood claim. The world tilts. The intruder in the hospital. The face that wasn't his. The voice that called me wife from a body I didn't recognize. My hand trembled on the stone. You changed him. The words burned. Evelyn exhaled. Not proudly. Not regretfully. Like someone speaking the only truth left. We erased his face, his name, his memory of you. Ethan breaks. Why? Ethan's shout cracked through the sealed chamber. She was to marry me. Evelyn didn't even look at him when she replied. No, boy. She was never meant to marry you. The realization hits like ashes in my lungs. Memories, the perfect wedding plans, the way everything was handed to me like a path already carved. Not for love, for containment. Ethan, my fiancé, had never been the danger. I was. The stone recognizes the shift. Claim acknowledged. Emotion trigger detected. The runes surged beneath my fingertips like volcanic pulse. Evelyn's eyes glistened, not with tears. Evelyn Hale did not cry, but there was something like mourning. If you let it speak your name, she whispered, you will not be hunted. You will be expected. Double quotes expected. As and destined. The last question before the name. Adrian stepped closer to the stone beside me now, no longer across from Evelyn. He spoke not to her, but to me. If you claim your house, you claim its war. I looked at the stone alive, waiting, then back at them, the woman who buried my history, the men who uncovered it, the bloodline I was meant to marry and the bloodline I belonged to. My voice came out steady. Let it speak. The stone breeds ancestral house identified. The next word would not just reveal a name. It would rewrite every throne in this dynasty. Names are not just spoken to be heard. Some names are spoken to be feared. The chamber felt alive. Not with people, but with witnessed silence. A sacred kind. A dangerous kind. The oath stone pulsed with a light no longer cold and ceremonial, but ancient. Like it remembered fire before kingdoms had names. Ancestral house identified. Evelyn turned away. Ethan stared like the ground beneath us no longer felt real. Adrian watched me. Not the stone. Me. Designation. The runes spiraled not outward like Hale's sigils did, but inward, a folding motion as if something sealed was about to be unlatched. House of the name breaks the chamber like glass under flame. Emberlane. The word shook the chamber not like sound, but like memory erupting. The torches along the walls roared to life without flame. The air heated, not burning, but rising, like the breath of something resurrected beneath our feet. Emberlane, the moment it was spoken. Every Hale crest carved into the stone walls flickered for a heartbeat, as if another symbol pressed through from beneath. A flame sigil. Not sharp like hail steel, but flowing, like fire curling around its prey. Evelyn whispers not to me, to the past they were supposed to remain buried. Her voice was almost reverent. House Emberlane was the only bloodline the Hales could never bend, so they erased it. She looked at me. Erased you? The weight of a forgotten dynasty felt it like hands on my shoulders, not restraining, crowning. House Emberlane, a name that felt like heat in my bones, a bloodline that stood beyond Hale law. Because it existed before Hale law. They didn't erase us because we were weak. They erased us because we would never kneel. Ethan speaks, finally understanding his role. Then why? His voice cracked. Why was I chosen to marry her? Evelyn looked at him with something like pity. Because only binding her to Hale blood would keep Emberlane from awakening. She didn't say you were chosen for love. She didn't even say you were chosen. She said bound. Bound, not loved. A truth that shook Ethan down to marrow. Adrian steps closer, but not as Halie stood beside me, tall, silent, his expression controlled. But his eyes held fire. The Hale Council made one mistake. Evelyn slowly turned to face him. And what mistake was that? His eyes never left mine when he replied. They thought she had to marry to awaken her house. Silence. Then a low, pulsing sound from the stone, like heartbeats turning into drums. Correction acknowledged. Emberlane awakening registered. The chamber recognizes me. Oath stone's glow moved through the floor. A ripple of light racing through ancient carvings like flame chasing oil. I felt it climb up my spine, not soft, not violent, claiming space. My voice rose without my permission. Not a shout, not a plea, a statement. I am not Hale. The stone pulsed. I am Emberlane. The chamber bowed in silence, not the people, but the very walls, as if stone itself remembered to fear this name. Creeds can be bent, oaths can be forced, but a forgotten bloodline, when it awakens, it does not ask permission. The moment I spoke the words, I am Emberlane, the chamber shifted. Not a sound, not an explosion, a shifting like old foundations remembering what lies beneath. The crest on the wall begins to fracture. Hale's sigil, cold steel, carved with sharp precision, began to splinter. Hairline cracks, then deeper, spreading like veins of ember through ice. The witnesses that had stayed, Adrian, Ethan, my uncle, Evelyn, stilled. The air thickened. Like embers hidden under ash, were finally given breath. Emberlane's sigil resurfacing. The oath stone announced it like a prophecy. The flame sigil appears beneath the crumbling Hale crest. Something slowly pressed outward like a brand being heated from the other side. Then a serpent of flame. Not literal fire. A carving shaped like a serpent coiled around a rising flame, elegant, fluid. Nothing like the rigid lines of Hale authority. It looked ancient and alive. Stone dust fell like ash around it. Evelyn finally says it. The war of houses, when two houses hold equal or elder blood. Law does not govern them. She spoke like she was reciting from a sealed page of history. War does. Ethan's voice was a whisper. War? Evelyn turned to him, and for once, she did not look like a matriarch or strategist. She looked like a woman who had survived something he had only ever read about. The last time Emberlane rose, 14 noble houses burned. Her gaze locked on mine. You weren't erased to punish you. You were erased to prevent another house war. The truth behind my fiancé's disappearance. Breathing went uneven, as if something primal in his blood had finally recognized the name Emberlane and recoiled. My father. He didn't just spirit him away, did he? Evelyn shook her head. No, a pause. He delivered him to the council. They reshaped him, wiped his memory, broke his face, gave him a new name. Why? My voice felt like gravel. Why him? Evelyn looked directly at me. Because he would have died rather than let them touch you. A pain that was not meant to health stone from med. In that vibration, I felt him not just as a memory of love, but as a witness of sacrifice. The man whose face I could no longer find. The voice that said wife through a stranger's mouth. The love they thought they could erase by cutting him away from me. But they failed, because memory held in the heart is not bound to flesh. It is bound to fire. The stone reacts to my pain. Emotional bond detected. Severed link identified. The runes pulsed again. Would you restore what was taken? The room fell into a silence so deep. Even breath felt like sacrilege. Adrian turned to me and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Respect. Not hail courtesy. Not politeness. A warrior's respect for someone choosing fire over safety. To restore a forgotten bond is to declare war against those who broke it. The question still hung in the air like a hanging blade. Would you restore what was taken? The oath stone didn't sound like a relic. It sounded like judgment. Everyone reacts, but only one truth matters. Adrian stepped forward first, his voice level, but his stance tense. Think carefully. That man isn't just a victim. He's a piece of sealed history. If you restore him, you restore everything tied to him. Ethan looked torn, trapped between inherited loyalty and a blood-deep recognition that something sacred was being offered, and refusing it would destroy him more than accepting it. If you bring him back, my father House Hale will be forced to act. My uncle placed a hand over his chest, where his house sigil lay dormant. So will every house that swore under Hale for peace. Evelyn spoke last quietly. The moment you speak yes, the council will feel it. Oaths bend the world. They will know Amberlane breeds again. A vision in the flame of the sigil, the serpent flame sigil on the wall glowed faintly. And for a breath, just a breath, I saw him. Not fully, not clearly, just a silhouette standing at the edge of a burning horizon, his back to me. No face, just a scar over his heart, the shape of an oath brand, burned forcefully. Don't come for me. The echo of his voice whispered. They will make you bleed, but love that survives erasure is not fragile as something inside me. The part they thought they had broken rose like a flame reclaiming oxygen. He already bled for me. My voice did not shake. Now the world can bleed to bring him back. The oath stone tremored almost like a heartbeat. Vow detected. Confirm restoration? Ethan steps forward, a different kind of loyal tie. To my surprise, Ethan stepped beside me. Not in defiance, not in protest, but in standby, like a knight assuming position before a gate about to open. If Hale is to answer for past sins, his eyes lifted, no longer Hale cold, but human, then I will not stand behind my father. I will stand behind you. Adrian moved to my other side silently, like a shadow drawn to fire. Evelyn's fingers trembled at last only once, and then she whispered, "So it begins." I speak the word. The chamber waited, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but for truth. I looked at the sigil, the serpent, and the flame, and spoke the single word they erased from history, thinking no one would dare say it again. Restore. Outcome triggered. Restoration order accepted. Initiating rekindling of Amberlane bond. The chamber roared, not with fire, but with memory. Somewhere, maybe near, maybe far, a man with no face would feel a name ignite inside his bones. A name they couldn't burn away. When a forgotten house rises, the world trembles not in fear, but in recognition. The moment the word restore left my lips, the oath stone ignited not with flame, but with ancestral resonance. A deep pulse that rippled through the very foundation beneath our feet. The Amberlane sigil carved into the wall blazed. Every curve of the serpent and every flicker of its flame, glowing like a vow, breathing again after centuries of suffocation. The world outside reacts far above the hidden chamber in the ceremonial halls where the great houses kept their banners. Something shifted. The Hale crest, silver and cold, flickered. The Davenport crest, old and noble, cracked down the center, like old stone giving way. The Ashburn crest, silent for generations, flared crimson for a single heartbeat, then went dark, and in a remote, sealed wing of the council archives, an ancient forbidden registry, one that catalogued houses that no longer existed, unlocked itself. Dust lifted, ink reformed, letters once struck through with black began to rewrite. Amberlane status. Rekindling air recognized bloodline in Motionen. The chamber blood answers blood. Evelyn staggered just once, her hand gripping the armrest of the stone dais. Ethan gasped. holding his chest like something inside him had just been pulled forward by an invisible chain. Adrian simply closed his eyes, like he had always been waiting for this moment. But my uncle fell to his knees, not out of pain, out of recognition. I remember now. His voice was hoarse, distant, like he was speaking across a gulf of years. Your mother wore that seal the night she fled. My breath caught in my throat. Memory returns. Violent images tore through him, through all of them, like a storm ripping through painted glass. I saw flashes reflected in their eyes. A woman in crimson ceremonial robes, serpent flame embroidered across her spine. A wedding night, the same curse I carried, torches, vows, betrayal. Hail riders, cloaked in shadow, dragging someone away, his face hidden, his oath mark burning like a star being forced to collapse. And then I saw him. Tied, struggling, dragged away from me. Far away, a man with no identity stops breathing in a cold, sterile hospital room lights. Flickering like dying stars, the man they took my husband's name from suddenly, arched like lightning, had struck through his veins. His fingers clawed at his chest. His pulse surged. Nurses rushed in. Machines spiked. Alarms screamed. Oxygen lines rattled. Subject reacting to unknown trigger. Heart rate at he's trying to speak, get restraints. But they couldn't restrain what rose inside him, because my name had found its way to him. Beer. In the chamber, the bond seal's thoth stone lifted from the altar, hovering between us, glowing like a forge. Bond rekindled, Emberlane arrows anchored, restoration in progress. Evelyn looked at me, not as Hale, not as a matriarch, not as a ruler, but as a woman who once made a decision that changed the course of bloodlines. Then there is no turning back, she said quietly. I stepped forward, eyes burning. There never was. Outside, a storm of iron begins. Far above, in the sacred council chamber, a bell rang. A bell that had not been touched in 5 generations. A bell that only rang for one reason. A lost house has returned. And somewhere, someone powerful, someone who once signed a decree to erase us, turned toward the sound with fury. When a lost house breathes again, those who buried it will feel the air turn against them. The bell continued to toll, deep, metallic, merciless, echoing through every corridor of the Hale Citadel and beyond. It was not a ceremonial bell, not a victory bell. This was an awakening bell, a sound tied to old blood oaths, written not in ink, but in flame. Every house feels it, even those who pretend not to. House Hale wore Rue Matriarch Serafini Hale, Evelyn's elder sister and the true political head of House Hale, stood over a long iron table carved with territorial sigils. A map of allied houses lay stretched beneath her palms. Her fingers stilled, her eyes narrowed, sharp as eyes forming in water. That sound! It cannot be. A trembling advisor stepped into the chamber. My lady, the oath bell confirms a restoration. The registry has shifted. It is no longer sealed. Her voice turned deadly quiet. Which house? When he spoke the word Emberlane, the advisor choked on it, as if the name itself tasted like ash and fire. Serafini Hale did not flinch outwardly, but a muscle in her jaw, just one, twitched. House Davenport, Council Terra Sealard Alistair Davenport, once a silent ally to Hale, paused mid-conversation with foreign envoys. He closed his eyes for a second. Impossible, he whispered, but deep down, in a place he had buried even from himself, he felt a weight lift, and a guilt long buried clawing at the surface. Ashburn territory, the old ruins. Winds shifted. No armies, no banners, just the ruins of Emberlane lands, overgrown with serpent vine and ashwood, forgotten by all who profited from its silence. And, in the middle of the old courtyard, among the broken columns, a seal carved in blackened stone began to glow from beneath the cracks. As though something beneath had begun to stir. Back in the chamber, the stone is not finished yet. The oath stone, pulsing between us like a heartbeat made of fire and memory, shifted its glow now, no longer only binding me. Restoration link. Active trace initiated. Locating taken. Bondmate. Bondmate. The word hit like thunder. Ethan looked at me sharply. Adrian's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes flicked to Evelyn. My uncle closed his eyes, a man who had seen this once before, and Evelyn whispered, "It's seeking him." The stone calls and he hears far away. The man wearing my husband's name without his face sat in a dim hospital room, wrists bound, heartbeat still erratic from the earlier surge. A nurse wrote something down on a chart. Then her pen froze. His pulse spiked again, not from pain, not from confusion, from recognition. His voice, though cracked, restrained by drugs and memory loss, trembled with something fierce, primal, familiar. She called. Machines began to glitch. His foreline ignited for a split second. Like sparks running under his skin, doctors yelled. Alarms blared, but all he did was turn his head to the door, like he was expecting someone to walk through at any moment. Not a doctor. Not a guard. Me, back in the chamber. I make a choice. A oath. Stone's voice echoed. Ancient and absolute. Travel link open. Do you seek your bondmate? I stepped forward. Yes. Ethan inhaled sharply like he already knew what that meant. Adrian's hand brushed the hilt of his blade, a silent vow of protection. Not possession. Evelyn for the first time bowed her head to me. Not as Hale, not as a ruler. As a woman passing a torch she once failed to keep lit. Then go claim what was stolen from you. Emberlane. And just like that the stone split. Light pouring like molten gold. A path of fire burned itself into the ground, leading to a door that had not been there before. A door between worlds. The moment you step toward what's yours, the world that stole it will try to kill you. The ground still glowed with emberlight. A burning trail carved by ancient oath fire, a path meant only for those bound by blood claim. The chamber had gone eerily silent. No one breathed. No one moved. Only the oath stone pulsed, waiting. I stepped toward the door. And death moves first. There was no warning. A blade sang through the air, not from the front, but from the blind spot behind me, aimed at the base of my neck in a death strike practiced 1,000 times by assassins trained to kill silently. The torchlight shivered. Adrian moved first. His arm flashed like a shadow cutting through steel, intercepting the incoming strike before I even registered motion. 2 blades clashed mid-air, throwing sparks. The attacker, cloaked and masked, landed lightly behind me. Correct posture. Clean stance. Professional. Not a guard. An executioner. Adrian did not speak. Ethan did. Hell sent one of the black sigil? Shock but not surprise flickered across his face. Before the council even declares opposition? They move this fast? The first blade drawn against Emberlane, the assassin, remained silent, but I saw it. The Hale crest burned faintly on his gauntlet but blackened, inverted. This was not a soldier. This was a sanction. A kill order sealed in blood. Not to capture. Not to negotiate. To eliminate. The assassin's eyes, visible through the mask, locked onto me. Not Adrian. Not Ethan. Me. His blade lowered slightly like a knight acknowledging prey. Eliminate the Emberlane heir before the bond anchors fully. The message was clear, carved in the air between us like frost. He strikes. But the flame does not yield. He lunged, but something changed in me. Maybe it was the path of fire beneath my feet. Maybe it was the name echoing through my blood. But when he came for me, I did not move back. I stepped forward. The assassin hesitated, his perfect rhythm disrupted by disbelief. Adrian took advantage, his blade catching the assassin's strike and twisting his arm back in a blur. Steel met stone. The assassin slid back, poised to strike again, but this time Ethan stepped in front of me. A line is drawn. His voice was steady, like a verdict. If Hale means to strike Emberlane before she even takes her first step toward reclamation, he raised his blade not in defense. In declaration. Then House Hale will have to cut through its own blood. First. The assassin froze. Ethan Hale, heir of the very dynasty that issued the kill order, had just placed himself between his house and me. This was no small gesture. This was treason. Adrian's voice cut the tension like cold iron. Stand down. The assassin hesitated, for one fraction of a heartbeat too long, and for the first time, I responded not with fear, but with command. Kneel. The Emberlane flame answer something. Ancient ignited behind my words, the serpent flame sigil on the wall blazed, and a ripple of pressure surged through the chamber. The assassin trained to resist pain, magic, fear stumbled. His knees hit the stone floor. Not because I forced him, but because the name he served had met the name he was meant to kneel to. Evelyn's voice broke the silence, soft, reverent. She carries it. My uncle bowed his head this time fully. Adrian sheathed his blade, eyes on me like a general acknowledging a sovereign. Ethan knelt beside the assassin willingly. The houses may deny it. He lifted his gaze fierce. But blood remembers. Once you light the first flame, shadows no longer wait, they strike. The assassin still knelt, not willingly, but not by force either. Somewhere between refusal and recognition, he stayed frozen, a man torn between the house that trained him and the blood vow older than his oath. The path of fire still burned before me, leading to the door that would take me to him. The man stripped of face, name, and destiny. But before I could take another step, the air changed, cold, metallic, wrong. Adrian's head lifted sharply. Ethan's hand clenched around his blade. My uncle exhaled, not in fear, but in memory. Evelyn looked up from the stone altar and her expression hardened. They're not sending one this time. The sound before violence there was no door opening, and no footsteps, just a whisper of steel cutting through silence. Then 3, no, 5 figures materialized from the shadows carved into the perimeter walls, cloaked, masked, silent, their presence bending the light around them like heat over a kiln. Each of them bore the blackened crest, the mark of death's sanctions. Not soldiers, not guards, black sigil assassins. 1 was a warning. 5 was eradication protocol. Ethan's jaw tightened as realization dawned. House Hale issued a black root order. His voice was tight with anger. They activated the purge list. Purge, not containment, not capture, extermination. They don't come for me first. Assassins didn't rush. They didn't posture. They moved like poison poured into water, silent, patient, certain. 1 went for Evelyn. 2 angled toward Adrian and Ethan, not to kill, but to delay. 1 stayed back watching. And 1 moved for my uncle. My uncle didn't even raise a blade. He just whispered, just like last time. Pain flickered across his face, a memory of failure. The last time Amberlane rose, he wasn't strong enough to stop what happened. This time he met the assassin's strike with his bare arm, catching the blade with his forearm. Steel tore into flesh. He didn't flinch. You won't take her like you took them. My blood went cold. Them. Who were them? Adrian moves like shadow, Ethan like fury. Adrian's blade found the first assassin before steel even fully glinted in torchlight. No wasted motion. A predator killing cleanly. Ethan fought differently, not with precision, with rage. Every strike he made was a declaration. I will not be my father's son. The assassin targeting Evelyn hesitated at the last moment, the unseen pressure of an oath matriarch still lingering around her. That hesitation cost him. My uncle, bleeding, relentless, threw him across the floor with a single brutal motion. The 5th assassin, the one watching, calculating, locked eyes with me. He didn't draw his blade. He simply spoke. You are not meant to reach him. My first true assertion of Amberlane. Flameth whirled, slowed around me, the clash of steel, the rise of flame, the echo of old oaths. The serpent flame sigil behind me flared, casting my shadow long across the chamber floor. I did not shout. I did not beg. I simply stepped forward. 1 foot touching the burning oath path, and the flame curled around my boot like it recognized its rightful bearer. Then kill me. My voice rang through the chamber, steady and unbroken. But understand, the assassin's blade lifted. You strike not a woman. The embers swirled alive. You strike Amberlane. Something ancient awakens in me. It wasn't magic. It wasn't learned. It was remembered. The emberlight beneath my feet flared and rose, not burning me, but shielding me, forming a ring of fire around me. So bright the assassins flinched back. Instinctively, the assassin who had spoken, the one who had not attacked, finally drew his blade. Slowly, deliberately, as if acknowledging, this will not be like the others. Not all enemies raise their blade with hatred. Some do it with history. The lead assassin stood across from me. His blade raised, but not to strike. No, this one moved differently. There was none of the usual emptiness of trained killers. His eyes visible through the angular slits of his mask held memory. Not hatred. Recognition. The chamber holds its breath. Adrian, Ethan, my uncle, each locked in combat with their own opponent, still turned subtly toward us. Sensing the shift, even Evelyn, still standing despite the clash around her, took one step back, as if she knew what was coming. The lead assassin lowered his blade to his heart, not in surrender. In right. By the seal of Blackroot, he spoke, his voice not cruel but heavy. We are permitted one final word before the strike. A final word. Ritual. The old law used in ancient blood wars before a sanctioned execution. Assassins were allowed one truth, spoken before death was delivered, so that blood was spilled in witness, not silence. He looked at me. You should know why he vanished. Time stopped breathing. The truth wrapped in a sheath's words came evenly, like a confession carved in iron. Your wedding night was not just a ceremony. It was the last Amberlane rite, a blood bond that would have reactivated your dormant house. I stood very still. He continued. House Hale knew. The council knew. The moment your vows were spoken before witnesses, Amberlane would rise again. His voice lowered, and Hale would lose dominion. It was never about love, it was about power. Adrian's blade faltered for half a heartbeat. Ethan froze. Evelyn closed her eyes in grief. Not surprise. The assassin took one slow step forward, flames spiraling around his boots but not burning him. So they issued a secret pact. Blood for silence. My throat tightened. Here Fiancé was taken under false arrest. Not for crime. His voice softened, like he knew the blow he was about to land. But because he agreed. The fire in me goes cold, my heartbeat stopped. He agreed. The assassin nodded, one precise, respectful tilt of the head. He struck a pact with Hale, to vanish, to be erased. His blade lowered more. In exchange, Amberlane would be left dormant, unhunted. The council would believe its heir had no bondmate, no rightful claim. Why would he do that? My voice was a whisper I barely recognized. Why would he do that? Why would he? The assassin the enemy sent to kill me looked at me not with cruelty, but something that almost resembled sorrow. Because he believed, his eyes held mine, that you would live a peaceful life if he gave them himself. Something breaks, but something else recessed. The world around me blurred, steel clashing, embers flaring, blood on stone. Peace. They thought I wanted peace. They thought my fire would rather flicker quietly than burn through the sky. How little they understood Amberlane. How little they understood me. I lift my hand, flame responds. Flame rose like a living thing, spiraling from the oath path, coiling around my wrist like a serpent reawakening. The assassin watched and nodded once, in warrior's acknowledgement. Then show them. I stepped forward, the fire at my heels roaring in response. I will. They hid me to keep the fire asleep. But now the fire remembers its name. The moment I accepted the flame, the chamber reacted like a living creature awakening from centuries of slumber. The Amberlane crest carved faintly into the walls, once dull and dust-covered, began to glow beneath the stone. Pulses of red gold weaving through the cracks like veins coming back to life. The assassins, even masked and trained to feel nothing, stepped back involuntarily. The air changed. This was no longer a battlefield. It was a coronation ground. Adrian speaks, but not as a rival. Adrian, sword drawn and breathing hard, watched me, really watched me for the first time without the veil of politics or rivalry. There was no mockery in his voice now, only an unnerving awareness. Is this the true Amberlane flame? Not a question of disbelief, a question of recognition. My voice was calm to calm, the kind that comes after grief breaks and turns into resolve. They wanted peace. My eyes lifted to meet his. They will get fire instead. Ethan feels it. Tuthan, who had always been quiet, always standing at the edge of shadows, guarding more than he spoke, tightened his grip on his blade. There was a flicker in his expression, not fear, pride. Finally, he whispered under his breath. The house rises. It was the first time he ever said House Emberlane not as a memory, but as a future. The assassin. Kneels before anything else could shift the lead. Assassin did something unthinkable. He knelt, blade placed flat on the burning ground. The flame didn't burn him. It acknowledged him. We were sent to end your fire. He bowed his head. But I see now we were only the first witnesses of its return. Behind him, the other assassins hesitated. Their loyalty built on contracts, but their instincts trained to follow strength. Fire licked around me like a cloak. The fire understands its only raised my hand, and flame curved around the kneeling assassin, forming a perfect circle at his feet. A mark. A choice. I spoke, and my voice no longer sounded like just mine. Kneel and rise as flame, stand and fall as ash. The fire behind me roared not to burn, but to witness. Around us Adrian, Ethan, my uncle, Evelyn all watched, held between shock and recognition. Because this was no longer just survival. This was the rebirth of a house. My house. A house is not born when it is named. A house is born when others choose to kneel before it. They hesitated, assassins, trained to value coin above loyalty, discipline above emotion, yet something deeper shifted in the air. It wasn't my words alone. It was the flame. It recognized me, and now it was waiting to see if they would too. One by one, blades lowered. The assassin who had first knelt remained bowed, head lowered in stillness. Behind him, the second figure, a woman whose mask was cracked near the jaw from Ethan's previous strike, slowly removed her mask. She let it fall to the ground. A quiet declaration. Her eyes, a steel gray, met mine without flinching. Then she knelt. A third followed. Then a fourth. The last one stood longer than the rest, his breathing sharp, conflicted. The urge to fight warred with a primal urge to belong to something greater. At last, he dropped his blade, and 6 figures knelt, heads bowed to the ground that now glowed faintly beneath them, the stone responding to their submission. Adrian watches and understands. Adrian stood silent, as if something inside him clicked. Not jealousy, not rivalry. Recognition. The moment felt ancient, like something that had happened before many generations ago, in the lost court of Emberlane, when warriors swore their first oaths beneath a sky of flame. This, Adrian murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. This is how a house is forged. Ethan steps forward. He walked toward the kneeling assassins, but instead of raising his blade, he placed it tip down into the earth and held it upright, like a standard bearer. A silent statement. Not guarding me, standing with me. My chest tightened at the sight, a strange mix of pain, pride, and something else. For the first time, Ethan did not stand as a protector. He stood as a sworn sword of Emberlane. The first oath every house in history began with one oath, words meant to bind blood to flame. I did not know the ancient vow, but the fire. It rose around me in a circle, ribbons of light curling like glyphs written in burning ink. My mouth opened, and I spoke not from memory, but from inheritance. Kneel and be flame. Rise and be house. Betray and be ash. The assassins repeated the words, their voices rough, uneven, but unified. When the last echo faded, the chamber itself breathed. A house born of fire is not welcomed by the world. It is tested by it. The moment the oath settled into the bones of the chamber, the flame quieted, not extinguished, but coiled, like a great serpent waiting beneath the surface of the stone. Something unseen had shifted, not just in them, in me. I felt it not as warmth, but as authority. It hummed beneath my skin like a second heartbeat. The world outside moves far above us, beyond the ancient stone. I knew something with alarming certainty. Word would spread. A dormant house had reignited. A girl who should have stayed broken had claimed flame and oath, and power, true, uncontrolled. Ancestral power never returns to the world quietly. Evelyn stepped closer, her face frozen between awe and calculation. You realize, she said softly, this cannot be hidden. Her eyes flickered upward toward the surface. The court, The noble families who once brushed off Ember Lane as a forgotten ember in a dead furnace. They will come, not just to see to claim, to negotiate, to destroy, or worse, to use. The first crack in the peachy low rumble echoed through the stone corridors leading out. Not flame, footsteps. Many. A scout, one of the former assassins, pressed his ear to the ground, his expression sharpened. Not ours. Adrian stepped forward, eyes narrowing like a hawk assessing prey. There early, he looked at me, not questioning my readiness, but aligning himself to my pace. Do we greet them as survivors, or as House Ember Lane? For a heartbeat, the world paused. This was a line. One way we leave quietly, hide the fire, pretend to be ordinary to survive. The other, we declare ourselves to a world that has always been hungry, cruel, and engineered to crush women like me before they rise. I made the show essay, felt the flame curl around my wrist like a living bracelet, a soft burn. Asking, not demanding. Asking. Do you claim this fully? Will you let them fear you? I lifted my chin, opened the gates. My voice was steady, frighteningly calm. Let the world see House Ember Lane walk in flame again. The march begins. Kneeling assassins rose not as mercenaries anymore, but as the first sworn flames. Ethan removed his coat and tied it like a banner around his arm, a symbol, temporary but undeniable. Adrian's sword caught the firelight, not reflecting it, answering it. Even Evelyn, hesitant as she was, stepped behind me rather than ahead, her silent acknowledgement that the path now belonged to my feet. And so we turned, not upward in fear but forward in claiming. The echo of footsteps above grew louder. We walked toward them. House Ember Lane, not yet recognized, but already real. The world does not greet fire with celebration. It greets it with fear, or the arrogance of those who believe they can tame it. The ancient door leading to the surface, sealed for decades, groaned as it opened, dust trembling from its old hinges, like the exhale of a forgotten history. Light hit us first, not warm sunlight but the cold shimmer of lanterns held by outsiders, waiting, watching. Their silhouettes stood in formation, lined like blades in a noble court procession, except this was not a welcome. This was assessment. The first eyes upon us. Delegation wore the crests of multiple houses, woven banners draped over their shoulders. House Valencia, House Varick, House Marcellini. Names carved into our history as allies once, and executioners later. They looked upon us, upon me, like one examines a rumor made flesh. Whispers moved through their ranks like insects under silk. She walks at the front, no sigil, no court robe. That cannot be the Ember Lane air. She's only a girl, only a girl. How many times had the world used those words like a blade? They expected a survivor, not a flamey. A tall man stepped forward, adorned with the crest of House Valeria, the very house that once voted to strip Ember Lane of its seat. His confidence was that of a man raised to believe that nothing beneath his boot could ever burn him. The House Ember Lane was declared dormant. He spoke like a verdict, not a statement. Its title sealed, its bloodline unrecognized. Evelyn shifted behind me, ready to interject with diplomacy, but I raised my hand slightly. Silence fell behind me. Dormant, I repeated slowly, walking forward one deliberate step. Do you smell smoke, Lord Valeria? A flicker of confusion crossed his features. Then he smelled it. The faint scent of ember and awakening stone still clung to me, woven into my pulse. His eyes hardened. Something in him understood and rejected it. Their first move, dismissal. You carry heat from an old ruin. He sneered softly. But do not mistake warmth for legitimacy. The gathered houses nodded. A sea of cold agreement rehearsed. Predictable. They came to do what nobility does best. Discredit before they have to fear. My first move. The fiancé. I felt Ethan and Adrian behind me, tension ready, waiting for my signal. The kneeling assassins now, my sworn flames, stood expressionless, but fire pulsed beneath their oath-bound skin. Ready to answer my word, I stepped closer to Lord Valeria, closing the respectable distance nobles maintain to pretend they are civilized. My voice dropped low, intimate. and edged like a blade hidden beneath velvet. Then look closely, my lord. I raised my hand, and the fire responded without being summoned. A thin line of flame tracing across my palm like a living vein. Gasps rippled through the delegation. A few even stepped back. Involuntarily, Lord Valyria did not. But his eyes, they finally showed fear. The world just witnessed it, not rumor, not claim, not a beggar of titles. A house flame, living and answering to its rightful heir. I let the fire linger only long enough to brand itself into their memory, then closed my fist, extinguishing it like a queen silencing a choir. Silence. No applause. No welcome. Only a shift in the air, the kind that comes before war or coronation. And as the wind picked up around us, carrying ash that wasn't ash, and heat that wasn't born from any sun, I knew one thing. For the first time since my house was burned, the world saw Amberlane and blinked. Some flames burn because they are lit, but the rarest, the most feared, are the flames that light themselves. They tried to hide their shock, but power recognizes power. Even in its earliest breath, the gathered envoys draped in silk arrogance, and the weight of houses that had ruled unquestioned for generations stared like they had just seen a myth crawl out of history. But myths don't bleed. Queens do. And I had bled enough. I did not bow. They noticed Ednables are trained to seek obedience and posture before words. They looked for a curtsy, a gesture of submission, even a flicker of hesitation. They found none. I stood straight, not with the polished grace of court etiquette, but with the unshakable stance of someone who had learned to balance fire in her chest without it consuming her, and that unsettled them more than flame ever could. The first Amanda, woman, stepped forward from House Marcellini, sharp eyes, embroidery made not for beauty but for intimidation. If you claim the Amberlane title, she said, voice cold, you must present your petition to the High Council. Else, this performance, her gaze flicked to the faint scorch still glowing beneath my feet, is nothing more than rebellion. Rebellion. What a polite word for fear in golden robes. I answer without asking permission. The council did not birth this house, I said quietly. The air tightened. Words like this were not spoken, and it will not decide if it exists. A few nobles visibly flinched. Lord Valyria took a step forward, masking his unease with authority. Then by law, House Amberlane stands as Rogue Flame. Rogue Flame. A title spoken in court records only twice in history, and both times it ended in blood. The air shifted behind me. Ethan's hand hovered near his blade. Adrian stood quiet, unreadable. Even Evelyn's breath slowed like she was holding a prayer between her ribs. The assassins, my sworn flames, now did not move at all. They stood like living pillars, silent but alert, awaiting a command. The world offers two paths. Council delegation believed they had me cornered. Submit. Request recognition like a beggar seeking entry, or stand alone and be declared an outlaw before I even claimed a seat. A clever trap, but they had made one mistake. They assumed I came here to ask. I came here to claim. My declaration. I stepped forward, not toward them, past them. My footsteps echoed not like a woman approaching judgment, but like a house arriving in its own name. I do not petition. The wind picked up around me, stirring a tiny flicker of ember across the stones. I declare silence. The kind that feels like the moment a blade pauses at the throat before it chooses a direction. House Amberlane no longer waiting. And then I raised my hand, not to threaten, but to signal. Behind me, the sworn flames drew their blades in a single synchronized motion, the sound ringing like a ceremonial strike across stone. Not an attack, a proclamation. The fire inside the ruin pulsed once as if the house itself answered. No one breathed. No one blinked, because in that moment, a forgotten house did not ask for recognition. It simply stood. They expected a girl asking for entry. They were not prepared for a house walking in as if it already owned the doorway. The delegation stood frozen. Their formation, so perfectly measured when they arrived, had shifted a fraction back, as if their bodies moved before their pride could stop them. It was small, almost invisible. But power is not measured in distance. It is measured in who takes the first involuntary step away, and they just had. The council speaks, but not with one voice. House Marcellini's envoy, the woman cloaked in teal and iron stitching, was the first to recover her court-perfect poise. If you do not seek the council's throne, perhaps you come to plead mercy, a polished smile. Too polished to avoid unfortunate consequences. Evelyn stilled behind me, breath caught. Ethan's fingers curled, slow, deliberate, restraining himself. Adrian watched me, waiting to see whether I would burn or strategize. I choose the third path. I seek neither throne nor mercy. My words cut through the air like a clean blade. I seek return. The word hung heavy, ancient in weight. Return. Not asking, not begging. Reclaiming. It stirred something old in the air, an echo of a house long silenced. Their first strike. Not steel, but insult. Lord Valerius' patience cracked. Return? His tone was sharp, dismissive. The house Emberlane fell in disgrace. Its name turned to ash by its own treachery. You rise from dust and dare. I didn't let him finish. Do not confuse what happened to my house with justice. His jaw tightened. For the first time, the nobles looked not at me, but at him. As if wondering, had House Valerius spoken too freely of an event they kept buried in polished history. The public face of power begins to crack. Lint stretched long and thin. Embers curled at my fingertips. Faint, unforced, not a threat, a reminder. The sworn flames behind me stood like statues carved from midnight steel. No flicker of fear, no shift. Their loyalty, though new, was absolute. That unnerved the council more than my fire ever could. Nobles trust contracts. They do not trust unbroken devotion. A quiet voice steps forward, then quietly. Unexpectedly, someone stepped slightly forward from the delegation. Not Valeria, not Marcellini. A young envoy bearing the crest of House Varick, a house known for diplomacy more than bloodshed. His voice was calm, analytical, but curious. If you truly intend return, he said, eyes studying me like one evaluates a threat wrapped in poetry, then you will be challenged. Not in blood first, but in recognition. Recognition. The first political strike. The council will summon you. They will offer a test. Not to see if you burn. His gaze flicked to the faint ember dancing on my wrist. But to see if you bow. The game has begun. He felt something shift inside me. Not anger, alignment. The battlefield was no longer made of stone and fire. It was made of names, titles, and the cruelty of formality. And I would meet them there. Not as a girl. As Emberlane. Powerful men do not fear fire in the battlefield. They fear fire that walks politely through their doors. The envoy from House Varick had spoken truth wrapped in warning. They will test if you bow. Before they acknowledge that you burn. A few hours after the delegation dispersed with stiff, calculated grace, the summons came, not as a parchment rolled with ceremony. In a royal seal. No emissary with a trumpet announcing names. A single rider arrived at the gates of the ruins, hooded, quiet, deliberate. He didn't demand an audience. He knelt, held out a sealed envelope, and left without a word. The Samansi broke the seal. The parchment was cold, the ink dark and formal. House Emberlane, if such a claim stands, must present itself at the council court within 3 days' time. Failure to do so will mark your position as rebellion in your house, subject to erasure by decree. Erasure, not death. I had known grief, but the threat of being silenced out of history entirely, that stirred a rage older than my own heartbeat. We read between the lines. Evelyn took the letter, her brow furrowing. They're not inviting us, she said quietly. They're preparing to bury us. Adrian leaned against a stone column, arms crossed, eyes sharp. They assume you'll appear. Desperate to prove legitimacy, his voice held a dark amusement. It is what the fallen always do. Ethan said nothing, but his silence felt like steel being tempered. But I am not the fallen they expect to plea, I said. So we will not bring one. I held the summons in my hand and slowly, deliberately, pressed my thumb to the wax. A flicker of ember kissed the seal. The parchment burned in a perfect, controlled line, turning to ash without a spark escaping beyond the paper. Not rebellion. Statement. A strange affair just then. One of the assassins' now sworn flames stepped forward, a man with pale eyes and a scar across his collarbone. Once an enemy, now bound by oath, he knelt, head bowed. "My lady," he said, voice low, in the traditions of the old houses, when one returns to council after exile. He raised his head slowly. "They do not enter alone. The council will expect you to kneel." Evelyn nodded grimly. "They will ask you to walk 3 paces behind their herald, a sign of submission before they allow you to speak." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And if you refuse, they will call it aggression, a neat trap painted with etiquette and wrapped in silk." I looked at my flames, at Ethan quiet and watchful, at Adrian fierce and amused, at Evelyn calculating with reluctant faith, at the 6 former assassins kneeling, waiting. Once, I had no one. Now, I had a house. I spoke softly, but the chamber carried my words as flame carries heat. "Then we will not walk behind them. We will not walk ahead." A pause. They listened. "We will walk through their halls, side by side. The house flame does not follow. It arrives, and that would be our first strike. The journey to power is not marked by flames behind you, but by the silence that walks beside you. We prepare not like soldiers marching to war, but like a house returning to its seat. There is a difference. War asks for rage. Return demands presence. The march begins." We did not leave at dawn like fleeing rebels. We left at twilight, when the sky burned copper and gold, like the world itself was acknowledging the flame we carried. Ethan walked to my right, silent, steady, the embodiment of unshaken loyalty. Adrian walked to my left, relaxed, almost amused, but his sword hand remained loose and ready. The 6 sworn flames followed in precise formation, not behind me. With me, even Evelyn, ever the strategist, did not walk a step ahead to speak for me as a diplomat. She walked aligned, and in that quiet procession, no music, no heralds. We looked less like a house seeking recognition, and more like one that had already claimed it. People saw us as we passed through the outer settlements. Whispers began to follow us like wind in tall grass. "Is that House Emberlane? I thought they were gone." "Look, no banner." "Then how do you know?" "You'll know." Some stared, some stepped back, but a few bowed their heads subtly, not in full deference, in acknowledgement. A spark. A child with ash on her hands as we crossed the old river pass. A little girl tugged at her mother's dress, her hands smeared with charcoal from the cooking fire. She looked at me, eyes wide, unafraid, not with awe, with recognition. Slowly, she lifted her charcoal-stained palm to her heart. Every sworn flame behind me stiffened. That gesture, it was an Emberlane sign, one that hadn't been seen in 20 years. Her mother dragged her back quickly, whispering in fear. But I looked at that little girl, and I nodded. A promise. The council gates. By the time we reached the capital, word had already spread, not that Emberlane requested entry, but that Emberlane was coming. That alone changed everything. At the gates of the council court, massive iron and obsidian carved, with the sigils of the ruling houses, a line of guards waited. Their formation was precise, perfect. Intimidation dressed as ceremony. A herald stepped forward holding a scroll and a staff. "House Emberlane," he announced, not with respect, but with measured neutrality. "You are summoned to present yourselves in the Hall of Accord." He looked at me, then glanced behind, expecting us to fall into position. 3 steps behind him, submissive, contained, acceptable. My sworn flames looked to me. I did not slow. I did not accelerate. I kept walking, straight, toward the gates, not ahead of the guard, not behind, beside. The guards tensed. The herald hesitated, stepping aside rather than be forced between burning legacy and rule-bound fear. For the first time in 20 years, a house entered the council court without bowing, and somewhere deep in the high halls, carved from marble and blood, the powerful felt something they had forgotten how to feel. A shift. When a fallen name walks back into a hall built to forget it, even silence becomes a weapon. The hall of a courtly council chamber was not designed for comfort. It was built for dominance. The ceiling soared high, deliberately forcing the eye upward to the banners of the ruling houses draped overhead like silent judges. House Orline Gold, House Thorncrest Iron, House Valor Sapphire, House Merrowind Obsidian, House Gravemont Blood Red, and above them all, the central arch, bearing the sigil of the Concord throne, symbol of collective rule. Our banner was not there. The space where House Emberlane's phoenix once hung was filled with cold white marble and intentional erasure. The eyes of the high houses were already seated when we arrived, each house lord and lady on their elevated platforms, not a throne. Something worse. A vantage point. A view meant to look down. Lord Orline's lips curved in a faint, polite smile, the kind that could bless or destroy. Lady Valor regarded us with quiet calculation, her fingers tapping the armrest like a chess master counting moves. Lord Gravemont didn't bother with courtesy. His stare was openly hostile. A predator assessing new prey. At the center table a seat stood empty, ours, but no house sigil was engraved upon it. A seat without a name. Protocol demands you wait. A herald cleared his throat, voice ringing through the cold air. House Emberlane will stand until formally recognized by the Concord of Houses. It was an old rule rarely invoked, a way to remind lesser houses of their place. A subtle, public humiliation. All eyes watched, waiting. Would House Emberlane comply? Would the long-forgotten phoenix bow to procedure before daring to claim space among the living houses? Adrian's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword slowly. Ethan shifted one step closer to me, silent, protective. Evelyn's expression remained serene, but her eyes, sharp as eyes. I did not sit. I walked forward, not to the empty chair. To the blank marble wall where our banner once hung. Every heartbeat in that chamber paused. The council expected a plea, a speech, an argument, a performance. I gave them none. I simply stood before the white stone and raised my hand, not touching it, claiming it. House Emberlane, I said clearly, without force. Present. Not returned. Not seeking recognition. Not requesting acknowledgement. Present. Reaction. A ripple went through the chamber. Some masked it, some did not. Lady Valor's fingers stopped tapping. Lord Orline smiled wider. Lord Gravemont leaned forward, voice low and cold. You speak as though you were summoned, not permitted. I turned, finally facing them fully. My answer was not loud. Permission is sought by those unsure of their place. And then I walked to the empty seat, not waiting, not asking. For the first time in recorded council history, a house reclaimed its seat without formal restoration. And in that moment of quiet defiance, politics turned into war. In the great wars of power, the first sword drawn is always made of words. The room of thrones without mercy. There is a certain kind of silence that only exists in chambers built for judgment. It isn't the calm kind, it's suffocating, like velvet pressed over the mouth of a prisoner. A silence that waits for someone to break it, just so it can watch them bleed for daring to speak. Lady Valor was the first to lean forward, her rings catching the light like sharpened ice. House Emberlane speaks as though it never fell. Her words were polite. Her eyes were not. A murmur spread through the rows of scribes, record keepers, distant nobles, vultures disguised in silk. Adrian shifted behind me, waiting for permission to burn the world. Ethan's hands were folded, but his gaze moved from face to face with military precision, calculating who would strike first. Evelyn simply smiled, like she'd already read the last page of this story. I remained standing, despite the empty seat at my right. Names do not fall, I answered. Only the people entrusted to carry them sometimes fail. A ripple again, this time sharper. Lord Gravemont's jaw clenched. The first strike of politics. Lord Gravemont leaned forward, his voice like gravel drawn across steel. You speak well for a house without land, without record, without even a banner to hang. What exactly do you think you stand on, Lady Emberlane? I met his gaze without bending. Memory. He scoffed a single, humorless sound. Memory is not law, no. I replied gently. Memory is older than law. Silence hit the chamber like a blade. Somewhere to the left, a quill snapped in half. Someone forgot they were writing, for the first time. The council was listening, the hidden game from the corner of my eye. I saw it. Lady Vaylor and Lord Orline exchanged a look not of alliance, but of interest. They had expected arrogance. They had expected desperation, but not control. I understood then. This wasn't just a hearing. It was an audition. Each house was deciding not whether we should return, but whether we were worth fearing. Evelyn steps forward slowly with the grace only a Black Queen could possess. Evelyn moved past Adrian and Ethan, stepping to my side, not behind me, not in front. Beside. Her voice flowed like wine poured in a temple. Once, they said House Emberlane was finished. Yet here you all sit, speaking our name. It was elegant. It was lethal. Lady Vaylor's lips parted a fraction. And so it begins. Lord Orline rose slightly from his seat, his expression unreadable. Very well, he said. If House Emberlane wishes to stand, then let us see if it can withstand fire. He gestured and a scribe stepped forward, carrying a sealed scroll bearing the mark of the Concord throne, the official decree, the terms of recognition, or the trap that would decide if our rebirth would begin in power or chains. The scroll was placed before me, and every eye in the chamber watched. Do you accept the Concord's terms? The words echoed. This was the moment. Not of battle, not of sword, but of alignment. A single answer, and the fate of House Emberlane would be sealed or unleashed. I placed my fingers on the seal but did not break it. I looked up at them all. I will accept terms, if the Concord dares to speak them aloud, not hide them in ink. The chamber gasped. Lady Vaylor's eyes widened. Lord Gravemont straightened. Lord Orline smiled.